Hello everyone, this is Caillou back with Dodger and Pipsqueak, and today we're going to be reviewing one of the newest sets added to MSEM, Arkadai. I think that's how you pronounce it. So
Yeah,
Arkadai is a set by Parasign, where the core concept or lore is that on its surface it's a campy set built around dungeon crawling and high fantasy tropes, but under the not so surface, it's actually secretly a video game world, unbeknownst to its inhabitants. Um, and so it kind of cheekily plays around with tropes in that space.
yeah,
And
and as
yeah.
you'll see, the mechanics very much play into that fantasy. So it kind of comes across as a very top-down set, and you'll see a lot of cards that embody tropes both in flavor and mechanics, which is pretty cool.
So yeah, uh, let's get right into the card by card discussion for MSEM.
Sweetness.
So the first one that we have is Bind the Great Evil. So this is actually an example of one of Arkadai's main mechanics, quests. So unlike normal sagas or discoveries or what have you, these tick up by having lands enter under your control, which is quite good with in a format with fetch lands. And Bind the Great Evil, even without that mode, is still quite good. It's a one mana non-land permanent O-ring that eventually just straight kills whatever you grab. So.
Yeah, I think the main drawback is that you need to have a creature in play.
And if
So it
that
kind of
creature dies, you no longer O-ring it.
yeah, so it's kind of like build your own fiend hunter, sort of. The weird part, like, there's also some weirdness with like giving your opponent scries, although you also get scries, so that's not too bad. Um, I think this card in general it feels very difficult to evaluate for me, and I feel like I need to play with it to be sure. But I'm kind of leaning towards it being subpar, given the quality of removal we have in the format.
Mm,
Yeah, I think I think it is a card that is going to be outshined. Is my current assessment of it. Unless you have additional like use gained by it being an enchantment, I
Mhm.
can't see a reason to register this over any of our like point and click removal.
Yeah, like you do need to run a certain density of creatures. It's possible this is like one of the better creature removal spells that you can run in like white creature decks as like your one piece of interaction because like this helps ensure that you have something around to target with its first ability and also um just using it as like kind of a one turn uh semi blink spell can still be powerful if it clears the way for your attackers.
Yep.
um yeah, all right, shall we
So,
move on?
yep.
yeah, the next card is a card I'm very excited about. Embodied Soul is one white for a legendary enchantment with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, upgrade it. Upgrade is another mechanic from the set where you choose one of the listed counters it doesn't already have. So that's Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, or Lifelink. And then for one white, it becomes a 1/1 avatar, spirit avatar enchantment creature with this creature gets +1/+1 for each different kind of counter on it. So it's very similar to Myth Realized, which is a card from Khans of Tarkir, I believe. Might be Fate
Dragons of
Reforged.
Tarkir.
Really? All the way okay. Um, that I have played a fair bit of and that I really enjoy, but there's a lot of kind of subtle differences where instead of just making a big stat idiot, this caps out stat wise. It can only become a 5/5, but actually it becomes effectively a Bane Slayer. It flying first strike, vigilance, and lifelink is kind of crazy in terms of ability to kind of stabilize and control the board.
Yeah, and
Um,
honestly, for a one mana investment, like 5/5 is plenty big,
yeah,
and
you don't really need to get bigger.
it's definitely worth all those other keywords. Um, you do lose the ability, like you do have to cast spells to
Yeah, you don't have the mana
buff
sync
this.
mode.
So this is worse than Myth Realized in like a late game top deck war. But for the most part, assuming that you are casting this early and playing a couple spells to buff it up, I'd say this is usually better than Myth Realized.
Yeah, that's fair. Um,
It is legendary, so you can't have multiples of these. Where Myth Realized, I believe you can. So
correct.
maybe this is better off as a 3 of. or a 2 of in your tempo or control deck, but I do think that this card should have a home. It's very powerful,
Yeah, I
probably
think.
in the top 5 strongest cards in the set.
I
Yeah,
would
yeah.
recommend not putting this in tempo decks. I think people are going to, and I think it's incorrect to do so. I think people love this sort of synergy and get really hooked on it, but I think in decks where you want to be able to pivot and be the beatdown, this card is really flawed because if you're trying to hold up mana and be, have both a proactive plan while interacting with your opponent, this card's actually a little bit tricky to take full advantage of. But honestly, this kind of makes me more interested in reinvestigating something like Jeskai Control, where you're a control deck that has the ability to kind of burn people out / beat them down.
Yeah, like I mean, just playing this on one, and then you counter their 2-drop, and then every turn from there, you're just like, I'll swing in with my 2/2 lifelink, and it's like that's a huge life swing right there, and yeah, it just like it being so cheap to both play and activate, and starting out as a 1/1, so that like so probably by the first time you swing it, that it's going to be a 2/2 because you're going to cast something else is just like, whew. I think it's quite strong
For sure.
Mhm.
All right. So our next card is Folsen, King of Valamir. So this is a 3-mana 2/4 legendary creature. Whenever a plains enters the battlefield under your control, you get a 1/1 soldier. And then whenever you attack with anything, you get to tutor for a plains card and put it in your hand. So there are a couple of use cases for this card. Obviously, he kind of fuels himself by making creatures that you can attack with, and then searching for more lands that you can make more creatures with. So that's kind of neat. I think that there's also the potential for like MSEM is a format that has some utility lands with basic types, and we could always get more out in the future. So like this searching for your Mosef in a deck that probably has token synergies is kind of neat. 4 toughness is pretty relevant. He dodges most red removal spells. I don't know. I kind of have trouble seeing a deck where he fits in right now, but he is a pretty strong value engine for white, especially with like such decent stats.
I also want to briefly note the fact that it's whenever you attack, not whenever Folsen attacks.
Yeah.
So if you curve into him, you guaranteed get to draw a card.
Mhm.
So it's that immediate sort of 2-for-1 makes it a lot more interesting because it's it's a mid-range value creature that can both A, generate ongoing value, and B, generate immediate value.
Yeah, I do kind of like this for some kind of like as long as you have like a really solid 2-drop that you plan on attacking with anyway, something like in a niche 2, I could see this being a nice card for like a mid-range creature-based deck. Ideally one that like benefits from getting more lands, right? Like you don't really want your curve to stop at 3 with this, because then it's like, well, what's the point of tutoring for more lands, I don't know. What do you think, Caillou?
Yeah, I think this grabbing Mosef is going to be a dirty line, just like in general. Um, I don't know. It feels hard for me to evaluate because it feels just a little slow.
Yeah,
But
I agree.
man, if
This
only
card would be an
can you
amazing
imagine if Idle also Idle also copied land types? No, that would be something right there.
thing.
But
Yeah, the
yeah,
fact that it's plains and not any land is definitely very relevant, because like if this is turning out two guys a turn with fetches, then that's a completely different story. But yeah.
yeah. For now, like I think it's gonna have difficulty competing against our other standard land value engines, but
Mhm.
it's interesting enough to be worth mentioning / worth brewing with is where I'm at.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Okay, so our next card is another 3-mana white creature. It's Knight of Valamir. So Knight of Valamir is a 3-mana 2/2. With whenever one or more creatures enter the battlefield under your control, it upgrades each creature you control. And the listed types of counters are +1/+1, flying, first strike, vigilance, and lifelink. So lots of options there. Um, this card was nerfed. It used to proc once per each other creature, which can get kind of silly if you're generating a bunch of tokens at once. So this at least like it can still proc off of tokens, but if you make a bunch of tokens with one effect, you only get one trigger. And I still think that this being like a 3-mana Cathar's Crusade on a stick is like pretty solid. Obviously it can't buff the same creature multiple times if it's already got a +1/+1 counter on it, but having the flexibility of giving your entire team flying to swing in for lethal, or your entire team lifelink to to easily win races, or giving your entire team vigilance to lock down the board while attacking, like and you can split this up too. So like you can give one creature +1/+1 or one creature flying. I think that's very interesting. Obviously, the downside is that it's only a 3-mana 2/2. So if you play this on turn 3, it gets immediately killed. You're a little sad. Or if you're playing against like another aggro deck and you play this on turn 3 and they just laugh in your face and attack you for a bunch of damage, like that's kind of rough. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think this card kind of fucks. It's like it does require you to have like maybe like a little bit of already winning syndrome where you're generating a lot of creatures, but it allows you to convert very quickly, like a small number of creatures into, oh yeah, I just kill you, I just win, and it's so flexible. I think the problem is, like you mentioned, it's like 3 mana is sort of at this awkward spot and it doesn't do enough on its own. So I don't know how much MSEM play you'll see, but I think it's one of those cards where it's like build with it, brew with it. It's strong enough to justify that much at least.
Yeah. Anything you want to add, Pip, or should we move on?
The one thing I will note is I feel like there's been a couple of cards where we've said Cathar's Crusade breaks this. I tried to go digging one up, but I couldn't find any. So just a thing to keep in mind. If there are any cards that Cathar's Crusade breaks, I think this is the cheapest Cathar's Crusade. This is the first Cathar's Crusade effect we've really gotten, and it's the cheapest one we'll probably ever have.
Yeah, so it can't put in multiple +1/+1 counters on the same thing, but I think it is worth noting the interaction this has with the persist mechanic. So if you have this and a persist creature and a stack outlet, that's infinite ETB triggers. So something worth.
Oh, that's actually a really cool. That makes me a lot higher on this. Yeah, like because you can have a fair deck that also pivots into just kill them deck.
So this won't infinitely buff your own board because of the upgrade restriction, but if you have anything like a Soul Warden, that's infinite life, right? So like,
and it's still
if you're sacking
infinite value,
infinite life, yeah.
You're getting infinite value off your sack outlet, and you're also giving all your creatures +1/+1 flying for strike, vigilance, and lifelink immediately.
So this is probably better for Persistocrats than what was the Grim Armory is the current one.
Oh yeah, this is definitely
Grim Armory being. I don't actually agree because Grim Armory being a 1-drop and being hittable off Endless Helpless Souls.
It's 2-drop.
Sure, hittable off Endless Helpless Souls.
I forgot that. I thought Grim Armory cost 3 mana for some reason.
Yeah. Okay. That's fair.
I wouldn't say it's like strictly worse, but it's definitely a comparison.
Okay, so next up is Loyal Squire, which, just popping in a quick mention, there were some like equipment combo decks pre-crotation that we had with Armored Flunky, which is basically this except 1 mana. So while this is 1 turn more expensive, which is definitely relevant for combat-based combo decks, I think it still probably revitalizes / makes that type of brewing more valuable again. So we definitely look back at some of the more expensive equip but cheap to play equipments and so on. Yeah, that's all I have to say.
I'm not sure there's that much else to talk about with that.
Yep.
All right. Okay. Need for Heroes. So this is one I actually picked for 3 white. It's a sorcery where you look at the top 7 cards of your library. You get to put an avatar card and or an enchantment card from among them and put them onto the battlefield. The rest go on the bottom of your library in any order. So the main thing that I'm thinking of with this card is cheating out really expensive enchantments with it. In particular, Unified Theory or Infinite Dreams. You have Reflected World Waker as a avatar that can end the game pretty quickly. But this is just a card where I don't think it's quite good enough right now. But in general, MSEM has some incredibly powerful enchantments where if you have a way of cheating them out cost agnostically and you can do so without it being a 2-card combo, that's pretty powerful and worth keeping in mind.
Yeah. Just to contextualize this a little bit, this set uses the avatar creature type to indicate creatures that are players of the game, quote unquote, and all
Yeah,
the
so
creatures that
literal
upgrade
avatars.
themselves. Yeah, and all the creatures that upgrade themselves have the creature type avatar. So, for instance, Knight of Valamir is an avatar. I wouldn't say that that's like none of them really make me want to pay 5 mana to cheat them out specifically, but um, I still
It's an
think the
easy
fact,
way to increase density in your deck if that's something.
yeah, it kind of depends. Like I think this is a card that feels like an investment for the future. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not
Mm-hmm.
convinced that this is the best way to cheat out Unified Theory right now. Like I think
No, I
Animorph
don't
is
think
a
it
better
is.
way of doing that.
Yeah, because we still have the Animorph as a
Yeah,
cheap way of doing that.
Although I think people do underestimate how the cost of the Animorph combo, both in terms of how
yeah,
much it opens
it's
you
true.
up to getting blown out / the deck building cost.
I just
But
don't love that you can pay 5 mana and just whiff.
yeah, you
Like,
need to be building a deck such that it is very unlikely for you to whiff, and it's
yeah,
not that insane to do. Like, sorry, gonna do some quick hypergeo.
While Pip's doing that, I just want to say it's also MSEM Council has added a new rule surrounding this card, wherein if you don't sing "I need a hero" when you play this card, you actually immediately lose the game, and you could get some uh, GP
There,
infractions. So make sure to keep that in
wouldn't it
mind.
be wouldn't it be need I need some heroes?
Yeah, you can alter the lyrics as you see fit,
Okay,
but
okay.
the
so
tune has to be there.
with 10 hits, you're a 78-ish% chance to hit with this. So a 20% miss chance still feels pretty bad, but I think that's kind of important to keep in mind. Moving that up to 12 hits puts you up to an 85% chance to hit. I would recommend not putting more than 12 cards you want to hit off of this, or that cheat off this. Like, I think something important to consider is if you're running this in a deck with a bunch of I don't know, random O rings and stuff. It's still a consolation prize. It doesn't feel good, but it is a consolation prize.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we move on?
Yep.
Okay, so the next card is Revela Star Touched. So this is one of the 3 planeswalkers of the set. She is a 3 mana planeswalker with 4 starting loyalty. Her first ability is +1. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain respawn until end of turn. Respawn is an ability that's introduced in this set with when this creature dies, if it attacked this turn, it goes back to your hand. So kind of flavorfully gets across like, oh, you go and try to kill the boss, but it killed you, so now you go back to the starting point, right? So the +1 gives your creatures +1/+0 and respawn. Not a great +1, but she does start with 4 starting loyalty, so if you play this while you're ahead on board, gonna put you further ahead. She has a 0 ability with you get an emblem with whenever a creature you control attacks, you gain 1 life. And her -5 is until end of turn, she becomes a creature with lifelink, indestructible, and this creature's power and toughness are each equal to your life total. So kind of like a Sarah Avatar, pretty much. I think that this card has potential in Soul Sister strategies. There are several successful variants of these decks that use basically like cleric tribal synergies, a lot of life gain effects to play a bunch of small white creatures and beat your opponent down, right? I think the 0 is actually pretty strong in a lot of cases because you might have creatures like Wayfaring Pilgrim that trigger whenever you gain life, and this gives you a permanent way to get a bunch of life triggers whenever you attack. The +1 generates some additional damage and lets your creatures attack without fear of being blocked. And she also can, after she +1s, she can immediately threaten to swing in for a lot of damage next turn if your opponent uses a removal spell.
No. Because if she's going to -5 from 5 loyalty, she's going to die immediately.
Right, because she'll die before she becomes a creature. Okay, so you will need to wait 2 turns, which is obviously a lot worse. Fair enough.
Yeah, I think she feels somewhere. She feels a little bit better than our 3 mana Elspeth, but 3 mana Elspeth did get kind of outclassed a long time ago, so I think it's going to be. I think you're right about Soul Sisters being the place to play this, if any. But I think,
Yeah,
but I think Soul
I,
Sisters also wants Helena already as their 3 mana walker, if any. So I'm a little shaky on it, but I mean it's a 3 mana walker that pluses up to 5, so there's obviously something worth trying there.
yeah.
I
I
think
think the main issue is like she's very snowbally.
yeah.
If you're already ahead on, if you like had a good curve and you play her on turn 3, like she that's her best scenario. But if you get your first couple creatures killed, then she's not a very good turn 3 play.
I feel like something with Carnival Yattery is probably going to be a good place to investigate this card. But in general, I'm pretty low on this card in terms of the +1 and -5. If this card is better than I'm thinking, it's probably as a result of the 0. Is my gut instinct. But yeah,
Yeah, I actually wouldn't underestimate the +1 because I feel like in creature matchups, it's going to be very hard to play defense against her. Um, just because of how like the +1 makes your creatures trade up, and then also like you can't block them to gain any sort of card advantage. So I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. I think it's the kind of card you have to see in action before you really get a full handle on it. But certainly interesting one.
And speaking of interesting, just like we started on a quest, we're also going to be ending on another one with Seek the Lost Child. So the first mode is you make a 0/1, then you exile the top 4 cards of your library, you essentially grab something with mana value 2 or less, and then you can exile your Lost Child and cash it in for 2 soldiers and 4 life. So I'm gonna like I think this card is fine, but I'm not seeing the big draw, so I'm gonna need you guys to talk me through it.
Okay, I think this card is straight up nuts, honestly. Uh, Basically, there are a couple different scenarios that can happen when you play this on turn 1. Um, you if you have a fetch land in your hand, right? The pattern is you play your fetch, you get to impulse for a small creature, which you are probably playing a lot of in your deck, assumedly. And then you fetch, and you get to get 2/1/1s and 4 life. So for 1 mana, you spent 1 mana and you made 2/1/1s. You drew a card and you gained 4 life. Like that is a really insane amount of value for just 1 mana. And there are some deck building restraints, right? The caveat is that your opponent didn't spend a removal spell on the 0/1. Even if they did, you went 1 for 1 and you potentially drew another card, right? This also, like, if this finds you a 2-drop, you can immediately play that 2-drop, so you can keep hands with like, I don't know, 3 lands, whatever other, like maybe a couple 3-drops and like this card, and you can pretty reasonably still curve out. Even better than curving out because you made 2/1/1s on turn 2. So I don't know. I think this card is the real deal. I think basically all you need is enough 2-drops to like hit a lot, like most of the time, off of the second ability, and this card's nuts.
Okay, I've been convinced. I think the main thing I was missing is I, for some reason, forgot that you trigger the first ability. So I was like, man, even if you get a fetch on turn 2, you don't actually get to really proc.
Oh,
Yeah, no, no,
yeah.
but yeah, the ability to just get like fully complete the quest on turn 2 is
Mhm.
where the ball really starts
Um,
rolling.
I
like
will
most quests.
say
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I will say only looking at 4 cards and having to get mana value 2 or less is a little bit harder than you'd think. Like with
Yeah.
20 hits in your deck, you're still a 20% chance to miss.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it is a lot worse than the numbers for Theocracy, but
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm.
And
that's all I
speaking
got
of
to say.
Theocracy, I think another thing is if you're playing a deck heavy on mana value 2 creatures, you probably, and in white, you're probably also running like Theocracies. Um, whatever the Kithkin Planeswalker, whose name I can't remember right now. Um,
Honey,
maybe,
and I think technically she's a gnome, but yeah.
yeah. Um, whatever the,
There's also endless helpless souls. Like,
yeah, and Monument to the Fallen Man. So you have like a very like tight set of slots into which your utility
yeah,
get me my 2 drops can fit. So
you can't run all of those cards in the same deck. you have to pick like a certain number of them.
See, I guess that's another thing where I'd be like, where do you pick Seek the Lost Child over those?
Yeah, so I think it's generally going to be the slower decks that really care about the life. Um, the 2/1/1s also will, they can block well. They come down early enough that they can do some damage, especially if your deck has ways to buff them up too. I still think I don't know, even if you whiff on the 2-drop, you still made 2/1/1s and gained 4 life for 1 mana. Like
That's true.
that's that's like a pretty
That's
darn
still
good,
pretty damn good.
or you went 1 for 1. Like,
Yeah,
like that's the
the
actual fail case.
the worst case scenario is you went 1 for 1 and either even or up on mana. So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's pretty good. I definitely think that this card it's better than it looks at first glance. I think you just need to be aware of the fact you can't slap this into the average deck. You should definitely make sure you have enough hits for
I
this
would say this
ability
is
to draw.
the second strongest card in the set. I would say
Ooh.
Embodied Soul is number 3. Yeah.
Damn, okay. That is a call. Okay. It's not one I would agree with, but it's bold. I will put it out there.
All right. Okay, I guess we're moving on to blue, right?
Yep.
Cool.
And our first blue card is a spicy one. It's Abrupt Duplication. So essentially, this is a showcase of Glitch, which is one of the cool mechanics from the set, originally override by Just Nobody. The idea is you have this spell with a lot of restrictions that you can pay more mana to get a more flexible version of. Here, you just create a token that's a copy of target non-creature permanent you control. So at its worst, it's an instant speed ramp spell in blue. That's still pretty damn good. And then you can also pay 1 to either make it so that you can copy creature permanents, or you can also make it so that you can start copying permanents your opponents control as well. So it's really flexible, and I think that, yeah, just like the fail case of it just being 3 mana ramp in a color that normally, at instant speed, in a color that doesn't normally get it, feels like pretty damn good.
I think I'm a naysayer here, so I'll let Pip go first.
Yeah, so my stance is I think that the instant speed is what sells me on this card. I think the fail case instant speed, clone one of my lands is great. I think once you start being able to say, cool, I'm going to pay 4 mana and I'm going to clone your walker and start getting advantage out of it. Or I'm going to, 3 mana, I'm going to clone my Terraform's Globe. Like, there is a bunch of cool little things you can do with it before you even get to, like, the 5 mana version of clone their creatures.
Right. So what I'll say is, I actually don't think the base case is very good. Nobody's really lining up for Natural Connection. I understand that this is blue, and blue gets to, hold up counter magic, and then this is like a nice thing to do on their end step if you don't end up casting your counter spell. But I don't think that is that base case is. I think the base case is lower than you think. Secondly, I think that you have to be playing a deck that has other non-land things that you are happy to target with this. And it can't just be Terraformer's Globe. Like, I don't want to pay 3 mana to draw a card. I think you need stuff that will get you like 2 cards worth of value. I don't know what it is. Like, maybe it's like, maybe you want to clone your Ostracizer Orbs or something like that. Like, that I'd be a little more excited about. I do like that this is flexible. So, like, in matchups where you have the mana to do so, like cloning their walker is definitely really sweet. Cloning creatures can be nice too. It's nice that it feels like a card that you'll usually find a use for if you have the time. But the mana cost is definitely real here. And I don't think the fail case is as good as. So that's what I'll say about it.
Yeah. I do also wonder if there's something like cloning writings, if that's a thing with this.
That seems fun. Yeah.
Writing also helps the mana clunkiness issue slightly.
Yeah.
If only they curved well into each other. No.
There are a ton of powerful artifacts and enchantments, and even lands that maybe you want to clone. Like, so It's possible there's like some interaction that I haven't seen that this card actually does really well with. In which case, I'll be wrong. But I don't think you can put this into any old deck. That's what I'll say.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Cool. All right. Next card is Awaken the Source. So this is a pretty exciting card. It's a 4-mana quest. It ticks up to 6, and the first 5 ticks you get to exile an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard, and you may cast it from exile until Awaken the Source leaves the battlefield. Note that the card doesn't get exiled when it resolves, so you can play this on turn 4. Next turn, you cast the spell you exiled for tick 1, and then you play a land. Tick 2 happens, you can exile the same spell. So this can let you kind of sequence your land plays to cast the same spell multiple times. Maybe you're casting a card draw spell, finds you more lands, or you're casting a removal spell over and over again. That's already a decent base case. If you hit 6 with this, what it does is until end of turn, you may cast cards exiled with Awaken the Source without paying their mana costs. So there's also the other mode of like where you just try to turbo lands, like maybe you just use shifting lands or fetches or whatever to try to get the 6 as fast as possible, and then cast all the spells you exiled with it for free. I don't know. What do you guys think of this card? I think it's very hard to evaluate, but it seems pretty strong.
It's 4 mana, but I think goddamn is a lot of value for 4 mana. Like,
yeah.
Essentially, draw 5 that can also put you super ahead on tempo if you hit number 6. Like, I don't know. Like I think the hidden cost of this is that, like, unlike sagas or whatever, you do need that constant flow of land, so it's a lot harder to keep this going than it looks like at first glance.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It feels like the real deal to me in terms of just a potent card advantage engine.
I think the main risk with this card is the fact that it is a 4-drop, it doesn't impact the board, and people are running around with all sorts of non-creature permanent removal.
Mm-hmm.
So you feel like an idiot if you play this and you try to get greedy, and you store up a couple of things, you don't have a good opportunity to cast any of them, and then someone just blows it up.
Yeah,
on the other hand,
it at least passes the Pitbull test.
Yeah. The other thing I'll note is it actually does the kind of stupid stifling effect that pre-change Endless Discoveries did, where you play this, you exile a counterspell, and you just sit there. And your opponent's like, well, shit, I can't cast things into that counterspell. Especially because if they do, and you counter it, you can then play another land and buy back the counterspell.
Yeah.
And if this is on the battlefield, all of your fetch lands mean they have to treat every single spell in your graveyard as if it was functionally in your hand.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of fucked up.
I wonder
bet
if
there's
this
something
card
there.
will be like. I wonder if this card will be like a big sideboard card for like really slow matchups.
Yeah, going over the top.
Yeah. Because like there are matchups where your opponent like laughs at you when you play this on turn 4 and just kills you. And I think that will be what balances this, because in a long game where you resolve this and you like keep playing lands, it feels very hard to overpower. Yeah. But I don't know. 4 mana is definitely a sizable chunk, so we'll have to see how it does. I think you were a fan of this next card, right, Caillou? Or was that Pip?
That was me. I don't have a lot to mention. This next card, Cut Causality, is the first card we've seen with Glitch, where you can remove a restriction for each time you pay the glitch cost, which is one. Actually, no, it's the second card. Right. we just didn't mention the glitch that much on the other one. I don't think the card is particularly good, but I do think it's important to note that it goes infinite with Spellslinger's Gauntlet, I want to say.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, Spellslinger's Gauntlet, where you can then pay the additional mana. So if you're starting off with 2 mana, you can just pay 2 every turn to keep your untap and your combat, and just attack your opponent to death with an invasive creature. We technically had a thing that already worked with that already, Inspire Actuality, but Inspire Actuality required a vigilant creature, and we didn't have redundancy for the Gauntlet. But
Isn't
set us
there a
on.
card called Encore of the Phoenix that kind of did that too?
That sacrificed the creature, so you don't want that one.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Also, it only works if you cast it during a main phase. whereas Spellslinger's Gauntlet means you cast it during start
Oh,
combat
gotcha.
or declare attackers.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think this card is like nuts. I think if it's good, it is specifically good in that one combo deck, and I think also if it is good, we need to change the art since it overlaps art wise with anti-magic, which I just remembered.
Mm-hmm.
No one even plays anti-magic anymore now.
Sag. Love anti-magic.
But yeah,
Right. We can move
I
on
do.
to.
Yeah, sorry. I was just gonna say I also do love this card. I think it's the first card I posted to the subreddit from Arkadai, and
It's a very clean design.
it's a very clean design. It really showcases why the glitch mechanic is cool. And hey, we
Yep.
finally now once again have a mono blue 3-mana extra turn spell. Ever since Fated Challenge was nerfed to 4 mana and then eventually removed, we haven't had one. So this is technically some
Yeah.
new old ground being revisited. But yeah, that's all I have to say about it. So the next one is a
Alright,
card
so
that I think,
Dodger,
yeah, Dodger, sell us on
you
this
were-
one.
Sure. I definitely went to bat for this card when we were making the list. So the card is Fragment Mind. It's a 2-mana instant, and it's a glitch. It's a glitch spell. It counters the base case is it counters a non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2, and you can glitch it by paying 1 blue to remove the non-creature part or the unless its controller pays 2 part. I think that so negate's a good card, right? Negate is a playable MSEM card. Obviously, it can be still in Pandemonium, but like some mana bases, blue on turn 2 isn't, consistent enough for you to run still Pandemonium. So in the early game, this is functionally identical to negate. The early game is when you care most about this costing 2 mana. Later into the game, what sometimes you're in matchups where negate is like you want to bring it in to counter some stuff, but it doesn't hit everything. And in that case, like being able to counter a key creature on curve, like actually is something you might appreciate having the flexibility to do for 3 mana. Or in the late game, if your opponent casts a non-creature spell that you really want to stop, you can like the big problem with taxing counter magic is that it falls off in the late game, right? Well, like in the late game, you don't mind having this just become a 3-mana negate if you just pay an extra mana to remove the taxing clause, right? So I think this is just kind of your standard like cards that give you flexibility have a lot of value, and I think that the base case of this is going to be pretty similar to negate in the early turns. That I think this actually has a lot of flexibility when you add it into your sideboard. Yeah.
So while I agree it's similar to negate in the early turns, I think the fact that negate is a 2-mana hard counter really cannot be overstated. In the mid to late game, especially when you're a control deck or you're a tempo deck and you're playing against a combo deck or another control deck, it isn't that hard to sequence in a way that you can ignore 2-mana soft counters. And the fact that this requires that it be a cancel in those circumstances, it's really hard to hold up 3 mana while developing your game plan. I think
I
it's
definitely
harder
agree, but
to take advantage of it than you think.
Yeah, I definitely agree. In some cases, I think I would have to play with it, but I feel like the flexibility here, where like sometimes you put negate into your sideboard and like it's a card that you want to bring in, but also it doesn't hit everything. Whereas I like this having the ability to hit creatures is what kind of nudges it in that direction for me. And it kind of depends. Like it depends on whether your deck is like how able your deck is to spend 3 mana on this versus really wanting 2 mana on negate. If your deck leans lower curve, then you might want negate instead of this. But I don't know. I think I at least wanted to talk about this card a little bit because I think that you guys are underrating it a little bit.
Yeah, maybe that's fair. I think it is very easy to fall into the trap of valuing flexibility over efficiency. And one thing that makes Magic really interesting is constantly trying to figure out the balance there.
Yeah, I just think that like you don't give up that much efficiency. Like you can always just play this as Portal Fracture that doesn't hit creatures. Like that's not an awful card.
I kind of think it is. Like I don't think Quench that only hits non-creatures. I don't think 2-mana Spell Stutter
Well, I
is
think
where
what
you
makes
want to be
I think
in
what makes
like
Quench bad is the fact that it doesn't scale, right? And this does scale. So like
I get that the 3-mana basically I think it comes down to whether or not you think the 3-mana mode is actively good.
I don't
Because
think
I
it's
think
actually good, but I think that
I think it
okay.
existing doesn't okay, so the one thing that I haven't acknowledged about the card that I think might be worth considering is it is pretty nice with Cane Dancer. Like it does work well with Cane Dancer, but I don't know. I'm really not sold. Spell Stutter has not been very kind to me in this format outside of like the most aggressive tempo decks.
It's
And yeah, Spell Pierce now, thank God.
I disagree. I think Spell Pierce is great.
I think
Maybe
Spell Pierce.
well, I guess I don't really play control, so
Yeah,
I
I
don't
mean
know.
that's the thing is I think the decks where you want flexibility are the control decks, and I think
Yeah.
I think you would just rather play like Pierce the Storm in control
Yeah,
decks.
like this is all assuming that you can't run Still the Pandemonium, because I think Still the
Yeah.
Pandemonium is definitely much better than this.
Also, the fact
Yeah.
that the glitch costs blue mana does mean that even in the decks where you can't afford double blue or whatever,
Yeah.
that makes this a lot worse.
It's more like 2 mana on turn 2, or like 2 blue mana on
Yeah.
turn 2, like how commonly are gonna get that? I don't know. We've definitely gone on a tangent. I just wanted to say my piece on this card. I'm happy to move on.
Okie
All
dokie.
right.
So next up is another cool glitch card, Glimpse Beyond, as though MSEM didn't have enough careful study variants already.
I hate this card, but not for the reason you think.
For what reason?
uh, it's strictly better hit the bottom.
Ah, okay. Yeah, makes sense. But yeah, basically it's modal divination careful study, and that's just good. TM.
See, I don't even think it is. Like, hit the bottom hasn't done much.
I mean, I think
And
hit the bottom is just kind of like slotted into the decks where you would expect our careful study variants to go into, and that's just about it. And I think that's fine. Like, I think that like
yeah,
I really think that like this is just kind of like, hey,
yeah. I mean, it's just
you want a version of an effect you already have, except sometimes it can have flexibility to do something else, and it's like, yeah, okay,
yeah.
sure, I'll take that.
I think like the saturation of careful studies, like we've definitely hit the point where you just have as many as you want now. Um, for better or for worse. Like that's something the format's balanced around, I guess. Um, and so like now you can play eight hit the bottoms if you want to, and there's also wheat from chaff and all sorts of other options. I definitely think this card makes me a little sad because it's like, oh, are we ever going to see hit the bottom again? But like, yeah, we probably will as copies, 5 to 6 of this card. I don't know. I like we've pretty much talked about what makes hit the bottom good before, so I don't think we need to like have a little conversation again. But basically, again, the flexibility is really nice. Scaling into the late game on a card that's normally not that great in a top deck position is nice to have. Should we move on?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And I think this is our last blue card. It's Patient Optimizer. So, another powerful upgrade card in a similar vein to Embodied Soul, where it's like, hey, 1 mana investment into a 5/5 with a lot of keywords. Except here, it's always a creature, so you got to be worried about it getting boinked by a kill spell. It can gain hexproof, and the main trigger condition, unlike the other one where it's casting non-creature spells, is drawing your second card each turn. So usually it's going to be a very similar thing because you're using a non-creature spell to trigger that second draw, but there are definitely other ways that you can do that through abilities, etc., etc.
We have good ways to draw 2 at instant speed.
We have some okay ways. Ambitious Dreams when your opponent cracks a shock land. Shock
Seems a
fetch.
bit unreliable. Yeah,
Um,
I guess so.
like
So
I
like
don't know.
I do think that so you need to do this over 4 turns basically. So like the if you play this on turn 1, uh it's not gonna be like quote unquote live until turn 5. And that's if you hit a cantrip every single turn, right? So that's a little rough, but the fact that you can immediately give this hexproof at instant speed, perhaps if you do draw 2 at once in response to your opponent's removal spell, is kind of nice because hexproof means you can have it dodge removal, you can give it flying, start attacking through creatures. You can give it prowess early on, and then prowess can like actually make this potentially really strong attacker. And you can always just give it a flat +1/+1. So I think even as you're building this up to become like this massive late game threat, you have good options for like how this card can navigate game states. And this is all assuming you're playing on turn 1. I think it falls off pretty hard if you don't play it then.
Yeah, it's the sort of card I want to love, but I'm pretty convinced it's just kind of bad.
It feels like a trap to me, but it could get a lot better if we get more stuff that like specifically works really well with it. That's where I'm at.
I do wonder if there's like anything to be said about using it with any other like counter synergy stuff. Like, can we turbo it? Like,
you
the first one
need
you always pick
different
is
kinds
hexproof.
of counters though. So the only way to like
Yeah.
cheat it is to give it a +1/+1 counter most of the time. I think that like so what I do kind of what does interest me is there's a card from Amare that hasn't really seen much play yet called Current Surfer, which is a similar 1-drop that scales when you draw your second card each turn. So potentially having 8-pack of this plus Current Surfer might give that deck more consistency. I don't know. Like I think I'm leaning towards this is a bit of a trap, but I'll have to see how it plays.
I found a way to cheat it. You just play Formation from Kahembo Old Dawn. You're welcome.
Yes, play your 6-mana card.
Yes.
Nice. All right, sweet. We move on to black now, huh?
Yep, and I think the first card
Yeah.
is, I think, one of the most exciting cards from the set, or likely to be most impactful.
This is my pick for the best card in the set.
Mm-hmm. So you want to talk about it?
Sure. So it's Corrupted Memory. You all know how much I love 1-mana hand attack spells. So what this is you get to, for 1 mana, look at someone's hand, and you get to choose a non-creature, non-land card with mana value 3 or less from among them, and they discard it. So that's Inquisition of Kozilek, but only hits non-creatures, right? Which is fine. It's not great, but it's fine. However, you can glitch it by paying 1. So you can either remove the non-creature restriction or the mana value restriction, which makes this, a triple split card between being 3 mana to hit anything, or 2 mana to hit any kind of card that costs 3 or less, or 2 mana to hit any non-creature card, right? I think that, first of all, there are plenty of matchups where this is just Inquisition of Kozilek, in which case, booyah. There are plenty of matchups where you'll at least hit something if you play this at 1 mana. But the fact that this does scale, so like, if you happen to draw this on a later turn, like, you don't mind paying the extra mana for it, just to be sure that you hit something relevant. I think that, like, I think that actually just adds so much flexibility. I don't know. I'm really high on the base case, and I think that the flexibility only adds more.
Yeah, I think there are enough decks running around in this format that play largely or only non-creature spells.
Yeah.
That this being if we're being honest, strictly better Inquisition of Kozilek because you can, kick it, is kind of real. It feels pretty bad versus creature decks, but also discard spells generally are kind of ass versus creature decks.
Yeah, that's my take. Is like, if you're putting a discard spell in your sideboard, you're bringing it in against decks that probably don't play many creatures, like, because that's one of the better ways to interact with those decks.
I do think there's still room in this format for Stolen Secrets, for instance, because Stolen Secrets hitting creatures is huge. And I still think there's room in this format for Duress, because in villainy decks, you do want your, like, spending that extra mana can really suck.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think this pushes anything out, honestly. Like, I just think it's a really strong option. that is probably
Yes.
better in the sideboard than in the main.
I think I'd agree with that. In sideboard I do slightly question why you wouldn't be playing Duress over this, but I think in the main deck, in like a Jund style deck, I think this is better than Duress.
Okay, yeah, maybe that's the take. I don't know. What do you think, Caillou?
I mean, I don't think I have any like particularly unique opinion. I think I agree. It just gets added to the pantheon of hand attack that we already have. But in a
Sweet.
similar way, it's not as but like in a similar way to Duress, it's just not as main deckable as Stolen Secrets unless the format changes it changes in some way to favor non-creature style decks. But yeah, I mean, I think I agree that this is probably my pick for, if not the most individually powerful card, the card that is likely to see the most play in
Yeah,
out of all the cards in Arkadai. But yeah.
All right. It's only downhill from here. Okay, so
But wait.
Who wants to take this next one?
Sure.
I guess I got it. Or okay.
Yep.
Okay, so it's final form, which is a really neat top-down design. It is an 8-mana enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, your life total becomes 20. So it's kind of emulating the Form of the style cards, like Form of the Dragon. At the beginning of your upkeep, destroy up to one target creature. You draw X cards and lose X life, where X is its power. I think that as far as like competitively this goes, like this is not the best cheat out target. I think something like Unified Theory is probably going to be better. I mostly wanted to highlight it just because I think that it's a really sweet design. Should be a very fun casual card.
It is definitely sick as hell.
Yeah.
I slightly disagree because I think this card is worth keeping in mind for the show and tell decks to have as sideboard tools.
Until you go to 20, it's essentially really powerful.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, where those decks can sometimes get run down. Like, Velier's very good at stabilizing, but this entering and immediately gaining you 10-ish life even is nuts. And then it, hard hoses creature decks from then on.
Yeah, just having the ability to not only kill something for free, but draw a bunch of cards, definitely really strong. It does it has competition, but it definitely is up there among cheat out targets.
I also, this is obviously the pipiest of dreams, but like in EDH or something, or maybe just like in a really slow MSEM deck, just the idea of just flickering this and just constantly resetting your life total to 20 so you never die.
It's
pure
like
bliss.
what is it called? Eternity Vessel?
Yeah.
Zendikar? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like that. Whatever.
Yeah, there's also an aura from Kahembo Old Dawn, which it's a curse, and then you enchant a player, and that player's life total gets set to 10 at the beginning of their upkeep.
Sucks, bro.
Yeah, maybe. Mm-hmm. But it just gave me similar vibes. But
yeah. All right. Should I take this next one? It seems like a very me card.
Yeah, yes. Take it.
Okay. All right, so we got Mukal Desecrator. This is our first official creature with respawn. It's a 3-mana 4/3 with trample and haste. It has respawn. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice a creature. So the base case that you immediately go to is like, okay, so this is kind of like a recurring Spark Elemental. I can slam this out, it'll attack for 4, and then I sack it to its own ability, and it goes back to my hand, right? That's fine. Dodges sorcery speed removal. The fact that this can sacrifice any creature, though, means that like you have the opportunity to sacrifice your smaller stuff. As Sam Black once said, the most powerful thing you can do in Magic is sacrifice your own creatures. So like, there's all sorts of utility you could maybe have for this, triggering death triggers, getting key creatures in the graveyard that you want. You'll also notice that it's a black creature with mana value 3. And I don't do with that what you will.
But
But yeah,
Dodger,
the joke is
color
that
doesn't matter for that. For I mean,
that-
if
that's true. That's true. Like so, this is unearthable, which is nice. Like it kind of has a oil drillery vibe to it. So maybe like a if you want to go in like a more aggressive slant with an oil driller deck, this could go in there as well. Um, I don't know. Like I think it's fine. It's another option in my arsenal of unearthed pieces. Um, I'm actually more excited about the next card. Um,
which also has McCall in the name. But yeah,
yeah.
Let's
get
get
it.
to that one.
Okay. So it's McCall Reaper. It's a 3 mana 3/1, and when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card and lose 2 life, and it has a respawn. I don't know. Like Phyrexian Rager is a card that's seen play before, right? Like it's not a bad card to have in like a pod chain or something like that. Um, this card just seems like a much better version of that to me. It's got better stats for trading off. You can attack with it, and if it dies, like you can actually reuse it and get another card. Like I don't know. This feels like you lose an extra life, but I still think that this is like a really neat card to have in like your toolboxy kind of pod style decks.
hmm
Um,
The main thing I'm thinking
I
of
think
is
it's
like
yeah,
in Zero Pod, for your 3 mana draw a bunch of cards, you probably want Bloodjade Prophet instead, just because Bloodjade Prophet triggers your Zera. It, in terms of untapping your lands, it allows you
mhm.
to potentially go deeper, and it has about the same kind of stat line.
Yeah, I the zero deck for sure. I feel like this is more of like a more generic piece.
Mm-hmm.
That like it's more castable too. Like it doesn't feel bad to like it doesn't feel terrible in like a mid range or control matchup to just drop this on turn 3 and be like, okay, you got to deal with this. And if you can't really block it, because I'll just go back and I'll just get another card. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think it's like it's a very solid role player. I don't think it's like an all star or anything, but definitely a good card to keep in mind for toolbox decks.
For
I
sure.
think I think it's good also it's also worth noting that it is particularly good against creature decks. MSEM I think has been slowly trending towards being more creature focused, and I
Yeah,
think the fact that this is very good specifically when you're the beatdown in a creature deck, this is kind of just impossible to block because if it attacks and they block it, you get a you get like a 3-for-1 out of that one.
yeah,
Um, it's not that great versus control decks, but also its fail case is it's a 3-power creature that has draw card on its ETB, so that's pretty good. I think Bloodjade Prophet will be the big check on this card's effectiveness, though. I agree with Kelly
yeah,
here.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
But yeah,
Who wants to do the next one?
I can take it. So our
Okay.
next card is Nether Fiend, which it's a whopping 6 mana, so definitely keep that in mind. But it can do mini Gristlebrand things. So it comes down, it's a flying trample 6/6 lifelink, and at any time you can cash in its lifelink for straight up just 6 cards. So yeah, I put this on the list because we have another big fatty down the line, and I thought, okay, if that's on the list, this one also has to be because I think that its ability to kind of go toe to toe, like just as a crazy mid range, just like, hey, I have this and I can just immediately refill my entire hand is just seems very solid to me.
Yeah, I don't really like this for hard casting it, but I think as a reanimator target, it can do an okay Grizzlebrand impression. You do need to spend 2 mana to draw cards though, so um, it's certainly not as powerful and may not end up out competing some of the other targets.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm honestly not that convinced on this card, but I could be proven wrong. I guess like 6 is a lot of cards to draw.
Yeah, I think yeah, my main thing is like I'm not like super convinced by it either, but I think it's more of like there's something
I
there. There's
the
something
other
there
card you
potentially.
mentioned is better than this for sure.
Mm.
Is what I would say, but I don't know. We'll talk about it when we get to it.
The next card we have is Promotional Code, which is a really interesting card. So 5 mana, search your library for a non-land card, reveal it, put it to your hand, then shuffle until the end of your next turn. Spells you cast with the same name as that card cost 3 less to cast. So it allows you to bank mana across turns, which is kind of sick. If you get to take full use of that mana, this is Demonic Tutor in terms of effectiveness. Um, it technically can do some slightly silly things with Dragon Wall fragments, but I don't think that's super um, real when you're looking at this thing. I think this probably doesn't get there. 5 mana is kind of too much mana for a tutor, and the fact it doesn't immediately rebate you the mana, unless you're casting a purely colorless card, just makes me think that this really struggles. I wouldn't be shocked if there's something that this can then go infinite with. Um, but I think other than the kind of infinite slash combo potential, I think you're probably better off having the Abound 4 mana tutor.
So what I do like about this is it. So, okay, so in a storm deck, right? That's usually what you're going to be trying to do with this. It actually has the potential to generate more than 3 mana if you're discounting the same spell multiple times. So that's one thing I'll say. Like that can actually make this a better Dark Petition in some scenarios. You can also like maybe combo this with some kind of like return spell. So like you immediately just get to that next turn and get the bonus. Or like maybe if you have ways to filter your mana, like you actually don't. Actually, no, that doesn't work. Never mind. I don't know. I guess this card feels like something that is worth building around to me. And it has the potential to do broken things if paired with the right synergy pieces.
Yeah, it's time to open up my 100 instigator tabs for Herald of Follow Years, please combo, maybe. Hmm. That's been my lifelong mission ever since I saw that card. I still haven't managed to break it. But hey, this is another card which does a kind of similar thing, so definitely going to be revisiting that.
Yeah. It like so. There's the other thing where like if you're bouncing a creature over and over again, like that this can let you replay the same 3-drop over and over again. Like maybe you have a way to repeatedly bounce your Tempered Unculin or something. I don't know, and then you just drain your opponent out. Like that seems kind of weird, but like maybe. Um, cool. Anything else you wanna say about this before we move on?
No, it's just a cool design, and I think that
Yeah.
again, I think it's cards like this which I think break up what could easily be a set that feels more generic fantasy flavored and turns it into, yeah, okay, this is definitely campy MMORPG style flavor.
Yeah. This also like mechanically feels like the kind of card that randomly is in a broken deck like 2 years from now. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Yeah.
I can't wait to cut out this clip and edit that in when we finally get that broken deck. Hmm.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Let's see. So next up is Raid the Forgotten Tomb. This is a 1 mana quest. The first 2 ticks are mill 2 cards, so not great. The third tick is you get to return a creature and/or land from your graveyard to your hand. So this is basically a delayed Grim Discovery that mills you a bit and only costs 1 mana.
Hmm.
Grim Discovery has seen a non-zero amount of play in Standard, I think. Making it 1 mana is obviously a lot nicer. You can think of this as like a black draw 2, or at least a black cantrip. And all you need is a fetch, so it's not like that hard to trigger. Like if you have this with a fetch, you already have land in the yard, right? So like all you need to do is mill a creature and 4 cards, which isn't that hard. So I don't know. I
Yeah.
think this card like does a fair amount. I could see it. I could also see it being bad, but
Yeah.
um,
I just want to say quickly, I love how you said this card's name and we immediately heard like the unmute sound from Pip's mic, like just ready to go.
So this is a card where I initially, like when people were first discussing it, I missed the and or, and I was like, this card's just awful, and I have no idea why people are talking about it. With the and in mind, I don't know. I think I think the type of deck that this goes in is a deck that wants to be trading, 2 for 1 as often as possible, that's trying to generate these small advantages, these small edges. And I think it's kind of hard to find those decks in MSEM right now. Um, because the aggro decks that go under you really don't let you screw around with card advantage like that, and the control decks that go over you can usually kill you when you're like doing these cute little 2 for 1s.
Yeah, part of it is also like why play this over Dark Bargain?
Yeah. I
Um,
mean, I think part of the answer is this has a lot more in common with Find Happiness and Misery than it does it with Dark Bargain.
yeah, if you care
And
about building your yard, this actually gets you to pressure really fast.
I
Um,
I feel like this card's probably actually good. It's just it requires a non-zero amount of effort involved in it, and there's the chance that you don't generate the 2 for 1, in which case this card was actually bad. Um, I don't think the fail case of mill 4 recur a creature or mill 4 recur a land. I don't think those are actually worth the effort involved.
yeah,
Um,
I
you
agree.
need to be reliably getting both.
Yeah. So you can kind of think of this in a similar way to like Seek the Lost Child, where you need to hit a creature in your top 4, basically, and you need to play a certain amount of fetch lands. Um, right? Like that's pretty much.
Yep, pretty
Yep.
much.
Yeah.
And like
Actually, when
playing
you put it
fetches
that
is
way, it
not too
feels
much of
like
a hoop.
yeah, yeah. All right. So the next card is second Planeswalker. It's Terran Joy, Cruel Huntress. It's a 4 mana, comes in with 4 loyalty. It +2s to give up to one target creature -1/-1 until your next turn. You tap it, and you can take all the counters away from it if you want. And it -2s to destroy a target creature with no counters on it. So, bada bing, bada boom. -10, the ultimate casts Biorhythm on your opponents. So each
And
opponent
you know
loses all the
that's
counters.
insanely powerful because that's banned in Commander. So
Yeah, it's definitely a powerful effect because they just straight up die if they don't have creatures. Even if they do have a
But
couple
yeah,
creatures, their life is now low.
I feel like
I
we
think
have
that
lots of 4 mana black planeswalkers that say fuck your creatures. So I think
We
the
have
one place I'd
less than you think because we no longer have Essen.
what
yeah, I think like this is a nice option. Um,
I would
I'm
want
not
Essen. Yeah.
convinced that it's better than Mafua.
Yeah. I mean,
The main
this
thing is like I
this
would love to
kills
see the
two
+2.
creatures.
Oh,
That's
sorry.
true. It does.
We
And
we don't actually
+2 to kill something with 1 toughness is also real.
Yeah, getting up to 6 counters. I think something people should probably explore is using this in conjunction with Frenzied Watch Keep and
Or yeah,
or
Herald of
Herald.
That's
yeah.
true.
That's what I was
Yeah,
about to say. Where like if you have like a proactive synergy with this, then it becomes better than just removal spell dot walker.
yeah, but you still have to like resolve this 4 mana planeswalker, and like by that point, like big stats aren't really killing anybody. So I
Yeah.
don't know.
I think the fail case on this is interesting. I don't think this card is particularly nuts. Um, it's the level of
I think
card
it's
where
weak,
if
but
someone
an interesting option.
if someone showed up for it in GP, I wouldn't immediately say, "Oh, well, you built your deck wrong."
Yeah,
But I don't think I'm going to be putting in any decks soon. So
yeah. It's like I don't know. I think it could be a strong card in the right meta where like you really care about killing 2 creatures, and maybe there are a lot of creatures that don't generate immediate value. Um, like maybe if we're in the Mossy Companion meta or something, this card becomes great, right? um, but yeah, I'd say this is like fine. It's relatively MSEM level.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so um, someone else want to take this next one?
I think Pip should take it.
Okay.
So the next card is Tweak the Settings, which is XX black black for sorcery. Choose X. You can choose the same mode more than once. Each opponent loses 3 life and you gain 3 life. Each opponent sacrifices a non-land permanent and you create a treasure token. Each opponent discards a card and you draw a card. So let's say you dump 6 mana into this. You get to choose 2, and all of the modes are like kind of good at that point. They're not great. You can generate a 4 for 1, which is exciting. Um, it reminds me a lot of Epic of Anku, I think, is the one, the gent-colored epic
Yeah,
from
the one
yeah.
that reanimates, draws 3, or wipes.
blows things up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
wipes.
I think that card is probably a little bit underplayed, but we also thought it was going to be a bit better than it ended up being in our kind of spoiler episode. I think Tweak the Settings kind of has the same issue where it requires so much mana to get the outcome you want out of it. Like when to kill someone, you need to get like 14, 16 mana into this. Whereas for 12 mana, you can kill someone with a Mastery of the Veil. So I don't think this card's likely to see play unless people are particularly excited about it / want to flex with it.
I think like so it's better than Mastery. Like if you're casting it for like 8 or maybe 10. But besides that, yeah, it's a little rough. Um, I think it's interesting. It's flexible.
Maybe
But
it's better in EDH, where you're getting like way
oh,
more value off the each
this hits
opponent
each
stuff.
opponent, so an EDH this card probably slaps. Yeah,
Oh yeah, the ability to just go, yeah, okay, I'm gonna make 3 treasures and force you all to sacrifice a non-land permanent. Yeah, okay.
Three, yeah, three non-land
3
permanent.
non-land permanents,
Mm.
or
If you're
like
casting for 3,
yeah,
Mm.
you can hit this in if you cast this for X equals 3, like each opponent discards 3 and you draw 3 can suddenly be like 15 for 1 or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of cool.
Word.
All right. Next card is card with some delightful flavor. It's Undying Lich. So this basically represents a boss that keeps upgrading as you defeat it. It's a 4 mana 4/1. When it dies, you get a 6/3 with Menace, and then when that token dies, you get an 8/5 with Flying, Death Touch, and Menace. So it's kind of like a Mitotic Slime-esque design, except instead of splitting into smaller oozes, you kind of just get an upgraded version of the creature.
Mm-hmm. So this is kind of filthy with like free sack outlets, where you can immediately cash it in for the at least the 6/3, and then if they have a removal spell, you can just be like, okay, I'll just sack it into a bigger boy.
Yeah, this feels like the kind of card that would be really, really strong in Standard. I think for MSEM, 4 mana is a lot. It's resistant to destruction and damage based removal, but it can get exiled, and there's a fair amount of that being played, so it's not even like totally resistant to removal. So I think that probably inhibits
I
its
think
chance.
if you curve a sack outlet into it, they do have to have like multiple pieces of removal to like start dealing with it, because you have to kill the sack outlet and then this.
Yeah,
I think, and like I'm really excited for it in like 0 plus Color of Hunger, where it's like, oh, this one card nets me 3 untaps. Cool.
Oh, that's true. That's actually a really good interaction. Yeah, I
yeah,
didn't think about that, but that is pretty big.
the 0 thing kind of is why I'm high on this card. Like being able to turn this into a 5-drop and then get potentially an untap off of this and maybe also an untap off of the 5-drop.
Yeah,
Assuming you have the 0 Color of Hunger into this, which is like
it seems
almost
like a
a curve.
decent godlike card too, right?
Um, for you really want to be getting Archive Guardian, and if you're not getting
Yeah.
Archive Guardian, you want to be getting Valdi's Muse, but maybe.
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Shall we move on?
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. So the next card is Fast Travel. It's another glyph spell. Until end of turn, target creature you control gets +3/+0 and gains first strike and haste. The restriction is you have to sack it at the beginning of the next end step, but you can pay 2 mana to ignore that. I put this on the list because it's a Reckless Charge variant. Reckless Charge was a card that was very powerful in the past, being essentially a Lava Spike. But what Canon Magic doesn't really have that MSEM has is 1 mana double strike creatures. So I think this card has potential to see play as a OTK enabler, basically. Like you just play your Double Striker, play this, give it haste and +0, play a bunch of other buff spells, one-shot somebody, right?
Yeah, and I don't think that deck had a good like haste plus buffer. So like I kind of like that like versus control decks or whatever. You can be like, or like versus decks where you're afraid of being interacted with the post board. You can be like, okay, I'm gonna drop like you can have this main board or whatever, and then you like side in like soliloquy or something, and then you can one turn kill them. So
yeah, like this is pretty much the most efficient version of that you're gonna get, I think. So like this will probably be the weapon of choice for all versions of this deck that try to do this in the future, which is kind of neat. The first strike part isn't super relevant, but like if you have a random creature that you want to like win a combat, you can pay 3 mana to have it do that, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, besides this, like this is a very specific use case, and besides that, probably won't be played. So, yeah. All right, so the next card is Improbable Aim. Anyone want to take this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I chucked this in the list because Shock Blast is a card that you see play in MSEM, and this kind of serves that role, but largely better. So for 2 mana, it's an instant. It has Glitch 2. It deals damage to target creature or planeswalker equal to the number of instant or sorcery cards in your graveyard. So for 2 mana, you can usually get like 3 or 4 damage very easily. It can hit both creatures and planeswalkers. It can't go face, which kind of sucks, but also this card would be nowhere near okay if it could go face. And if you make it 4 mana, it'll also count all your fetch lands or creatures that died or whatever, and probably become very hard removal. This is a card I'm specifically thinking about for red X decks that don't get access to hard removal. So a typical issue that the kind of burn, Ninhasir, etc. style of decks have is once a creature has 4 toughness, it becomes you have to 2-for-1 yourself, and once it has like, 6 or 7 toughness, it's like kind of functionally unkillable. Whereas Improbable Aim puts those back into range of killing them fairly card efficiently as well. So very much you'll know you need it when you need it, and it's probably only for the sideboard, but the fact it can hit both creatures and planeswalkers is why I think this is better than Improbable Aim.
Yeah, and then when we print Pain Dancer, our 1 red flashback insert sorcery with convert mana cost 2, that's red. That's when Improbable Aim is really gonna pop off. You'll see.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Next up is Mana Overflow. I think this is another card that Pip wanted to talk about, so you get the back-to-back.
Yeah, this is a card where I really want it to be good, and I'm not certain it will be. But so for 3 in red, Glitch, discard a card. Add red for each mountain land you control. Then exile top 3 cards of your library. You play one of those cards this turn. So if you have mostly mountains, this can be sometimes they pay for itself. Look at the top 3, choose one, you can cast it. If you get discounts on it, which isn't very hard in a Storm deck, this starts looking scarier, especially if you can discard extra lands to make it draw 3 cards or produce more mana. Again, I'm not certain about this card, but I think if/when this card is good, it's when you have a cost reducer in play and a card to pitch, in which case I think a draw 3 that rebates itself is probably good enough.
Yeah, I think this is like a pretty solid Storm engine. I think you need to be like skewing towards mountains at the very least. But it's nice that like if you have extra cards to burn, you can just kind of ignore that part. I think when you're glitching, like you should usually be planning on like getting rid of the 1-of restriction. Like I don't think this card is very good if you're just playing it without glitching it, right?
And I think that in Storm decks you can pretty easily be 2-color and just play all of the mountain duels. So
yeah, that's not too hard. I don't know. Like I think this card could very easily be very strong, especially if you have ways to reduce the cost. Like theoretically, if you promotional code this, it costs 1 mana, right? Like
I'm also liking like Flatboat Artisan into this on turn 3.
Ooh, especially if you can. I mean, Flatboat, I wouldn't want it on turn 3, but like if you go, I guess if you go like Ritual into this on turn 4 with a Flatboat Artisan to play, and you can copy it to get the mana again.
Yeah,
That's
Okay,
what-
yeah,
actually,
yeah.
this
Then
is
then
a
you're
great card
really
to copy
playing.
with Flatboat because you don't need to pay the glitch again when you do copy it.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
Okay, then you start to really pop off.
okay, I'm actually more convinced. I think this is a very strong
Yo,
storm.
bringing back traditional storm? Question mark.
I mean,
Yo.
God, I hope so.
maybe like there's a chance this is like this format's Past in Flames.
Mm-hmm.
Like probably not, but like
Do you mean this
there's a
format's
chance.
ebb and flow? Thank you very much.
I mean that card's super banned, right?
Yes.
Super bad.
Yeah. Dodger just has like an epiphany, like, wait, it's not banned? What have I been doing? Not playing Storm my entire life.
Well, I don't know. I mean that card was banned when I joined the format, so I
Yeah,
just
yeah,
figured.
yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
The old days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Mukal Charger. 4 mana haste 3/3, but where it really shines is it basically gives you a second combat phase, but only for your constructs. And as a cherry on top, it does have respawn, so they can't even just be like, okay, well, I'll kill this in one combat, and then the rest of the constructs don't do much. It's one
Yeah.
of this is probably the construct tribal card that I'm less excited about in this set. We'll be getting to the other one later, but it's still quite strong in that regard, and MSEM already has like good artifact creature deck that runs mostly constructs that I think that like something like this could potentially be good in. But like 4 mana is steep, so we'll have to see in that regard.
So what this does do, which is kind of cute, is it lets Oil Driller pick up both cards.
Haha.
Big brain.
Value.
Hilarious. Yeah, like it's kind of funny that this set has black-red construct tribal, and then Almare also has like a black-red archetype which has all constructs.
Mm-hmm. That's
So
what we
I
call
think this card is actually
conversion
better
design, baby.
positioned. This card is actually better positioned in MSEM than you might first expect, just because there happen to be a lot of pretty solid constructs.
I'm
So
kind of
yeah,
I'm
I don't
kind
know.
of curious if Arcane Metalcrafter can make a comeback with these construct tribal decks.
Yeah, maybe. Arcane Metalcrafter doesn't seem like a terrible card.
Yeah, it was pretty fucked up in Wizard Tribal, and I think that like, yeah, I'll talk about it more when we get to the other one, because I think the other one
Yeah.
is kind of like the real like, okay, we're building a deck around this, but
Yeah. And a couple cards we mentioned earlier, Mukal Desecrator and Mukal Reaper are also both constructs that cost 3, so they curve into this. So, it's interesting. We also didn't mention this has respawn, so like respawn and haste is a good combo.
I said that.
Theoretically, this is hard to deal with by blocking with creatures. Your opponent can always your opponent will need an instant speed removal spell to deal with this, most likely. All right, so the next card is Selvar's Defiance. So kind of in a similar theme to the fast travel. This does kind of the opposite thing where it also gets creature haste, but it actually grants it double strike and trample. So it's the kind of card that you want to play on a creature that already has a lot of power and get a haste and kill somebody with, right? And it cantrips, which is neat. 2 mana is like not great. Like this card would be a lot stronger for 1 mana though, so I don't think I really want that. But it's the kind of card you can use for like some cheeky OTK strategies, I think. Or like various kinds of infect style combo. I don't know.
I will say that this kind of card, so Temur Battle Rage shows up every so often in Death Shadow.
Yeah.
You can't run this card in a fair deck because the sorcery speed, because you have to sacrifice the creature. So you can't just like freely cantrip it. You have to be giving up a creature to be using it. So it makes the 2-for-1 into a 1-for-1, which or like 2-for-0 into a 1-for-0, which definitely takes some of the bite off it, but I don't
feel
think
like Temur Battle Rage, you didn't really cast it unless your opponent was gonna die though, anyway.
no, but I mean also with Temur Battle Rage,
Instant
like
speed
whenever
is
you cast it, your opponent basically just died on the spot. Like it being an instant definitely changed how you could play it, because your
Yeah.
opponent could sometimes make a block being like, well, I can either sacrifice all my creatures for no reason, or I can chump block and hope they don't have Temur Battle Rage, or say no blocks and kill them on the crackback if they don't have Temur Battle Rage,
Right.
and then you surprise them. Whereas this, you have none of those options.
Yeah. Like I definitely don't think this card is as good as Temur Battle Rage, but there are a decent number of scenarios where it's like kind of identical, plus the haste is kind of real. So I don't know, like it's kind of hard to evaluate, to be honest. I think where I usually see this doing things is like the less fair style of decks because of the sorcery mode. But yeah, I don't know. We also don't really have a good Death Shadow equivalent, so that kind of also
Yeah,
comes into
and
there.
no Herald of Oblivion does not count for the person
I
who's
guess
frantically going to the comments to type.
there's Nightmares Unseen.
Nightmares Unseen, yeah, kind of works.
Yeah, I think Nightmares Unseen probably should be explored a little bit more.
Yeah.
I also want to say before we move on, I kind of hate this card because the flavor text made me think that Selvar was kind of a cool guy, and then you read all of the other flavor text, and then he's just the biggest douchebag. So this one, this as my first impression was definitely misleading. Don't be fooled.
I really love how this set actually develops like a core group of characters across flavor text of a ton of cards. I'll just say
it's
that.
weirdly really like, again, like I think it is so easy to go wrong when your flavor base is kind of like generic fantasy, but like Parasign kind of masterfully develops both the video game aspects of it and, like you mentioned, the characters themselves. So
this is honestly just a very fun set to read through. I would really recommend just going through and reading all the flavor text.
Moving on to the next card, Dodger, I think you were the one that flagged this because
this card is just kind of funny. It's Uncanny Investor. It's a Savannah Lion in red. It has a pretty sizable drawback. You can only spend mana produced by treasures to cast spells. So that's rough, right? But it has an ability. You can pay 2 mana and discard a card to create 2 treasures.
And you can keep paying those treasures into its own ability, so you can one with nothing yourself. Yes, that's the
card. You sure can. Yeah. I think that like, so theoretically, right? If you're just playing this quote unquote like fairly, what it does is it lets you filter mana at the cost of discarding a card, right? And you have to do that, and you also get a 1 mana 2/1. But like that's not good, right? What this does do is it lets you save mana over turns. So like you can play this as a 1-drop on turn 2, discard a card, and then on turn 3, discard another card, make 2 more treasures, and now you've got 4 mana on turn 3, right? So like that's kind of neat.
I feel like this guy is probably pretty good, or like I feel like the main way that you want to play this is with like a sack outlet, so that you can be like, okay, I'm gonna pop off this turn. I have used you for enough mana, and just sack him, and then now you can spend all your lands as well. So
that's a good point. Yeah. It's worth noting that not only does this guy power Dragon Gate, but he also naturally allows you to cast Dragon Gate on turn 3. Because of the aforementioned play pattern I just described, where he ramps you into 4 mana on turn 3. So like, the Dragon Gate is just one of many ways to abuse having a lot of artifact tokens in play. And trust me, MSEM has many ways. So I think that this card probably has a home. The fact that it's a Savannah Lions ain't bad either. So if you happen to be a more aggressively slanted deck, like that makes him better too. I don't know. I would keep my eye on it. I don't think it's obviously not the kind of card every deck wants, but there's probably some things you can do that make this very strong.
It's unique in what it does, so I think that that's always something to keep an eye on. It's unique and cheap
as well. So like, you can cast your Fiery Temper whenever you want, basically. If you have 2 treasures out.
You can also magical Christmas land your way into a turn 2 reanimation with using, turn 1 this, turn 2 mana neutral, discard a thing, cast Scintillate, cast reanimation spell. Where this is basically just
no, you can't because you can only spend mana produced by treasures.
Oh, that's true. Yep. Well, you can dump the Scintillate back in, and you can just empty your entire hand.
Yeah.
You'll filter your mana into treasures. Doesn't seem quite like the line.
It's interesting.
Okay.
It's a very interesting card. One of my favorite designs in the set for
Mhm.
sure. All right.
Next up,
Who
we
wants
have
to do the next card?
Volcano Tyrant, and
All right.
you do this one because you
Oh,
were
okay.
saying it's better than my boy
Oh, that's true.
Netherfiend or whatever.
Nidophine? Yeah. So Volcano Tyrant is a 6-mana 6/6 dragon with flying and haste. It also enters the battlefield with a first strike counter on it. You can pay 3 mana to remove the first strike counter and double its power, and it gains trample until end of turn. So I think that this is like if you want your ramp deck to kill your opponent quickly, 6 mana is on the lower, like slightly lower end of ramp targets for like green red ramp decks. This immediately smacks your opponent for 6 damage in the face, and then if you untap, your opponent is almost surely dying unless they killed it because uh 12 damage, and trample is gonna kill them for sure. This unfortunately doesn't have the interaction that I thought it did, where you attack them, let the first strike damage happen, and then remove the first strike counter, so it doesn't have first strike anymore, and it does regular combat damage too. That would be really funny, but it doesn't work like that apparently. But like, I still
Sad.
think that, yeah, I still think that like, I don't know, for green red ramp decks, like this is an option for sideboards if you just need ways to clock people faster. Um, like this is potentially better than Rock Roll in matchups like that, because Rock Roll, if your opponent is running sweepers, then it's like, okay, you just trade for one. But like this immediately does 6 damage, unless they have a removal spell. So
I mean, I do think that like removal spells are likely more common than sweepers, so it's like it depends on where you take your beatings. And you can
yeah,
also and hey, you can do both if you play Lair in Alpha. So
that's true. Like I think that this is definitely better against creature decks though, because like I don't know, if this comes down, like
because flying first strike haste, you definitely gets through any blocker
it's
they could have.
basically it's basically your opponent just dies next turn. Like this does 18 damage by itself if you just like think of it like that, basically. And it tramples on the next turn too. Like that is, I don't know, that just seems like a lot to me. It's just a lot of damage. What do you think, Pip?
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of summarized it. I think it is good in the kind of specific circumstances we're describing it in. I think it's a
Yeah,
little bit risky to include this type of 6 drop in most MSEM decks, but it does have immediate impact, so that's kind of nice.
yeah.
Um,
When Para sent the set to me for like before submitting, this card cost 5 mana. It was a 5/5.
yeah, that would be less okay, I think.
It's like, I don't know, man. This thing kills you pretty fast. I still think it's fine. Like I think it's a good option for MCM decks. But yeah.
And weirdly, I feel like there's lots of dragon designs because everyone wants an iconic red dragon, and it's so easy to
Yeah.
like make something that feels generic or lame. I think this definitely captures the feeling when you first play Magic and you pull like a dummy red dragon, you're like, what? This kills them
Yeah.
how fast now?
This
Oh
kind of reminds me of
damn!
Hellcat Charger, which was like the original dummy dragon that I played with and was like, oh my god, this card's insane.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, it's
for
definitely
sure.
stronger than Hellcat Charger. But yeah.
So the next card is one that I would say has probably had the most buzz around it in this kind of preview season.
Mhm.
It's Gather the Gang. 1 green, uncommon. Choose a creature type. Reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a card of the chosen type. Put that card in your hand. The rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
Like Gathering the Gang is
Yeah,
different
it's a
cards.
silly pip.
Sorry,
Gather.
gather the party.
Yeah.
Close enough. Subtle distinctions. So, in terms of gather the party, this card can be a tutor if you have a creature with a unique type. If you name a type that is a creature that isn't in your deck, you can exile your entire library. If you have that one Ophorio enchantment in play. Um,
That one Ophorio card.
those 2 modes are the modes people have mostly been talking about it. I think the first one's less good than people think, just because we have Gallard's Ascension and no one is playing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is green white for Eldamri's Call, plus it finds Planeswalkers, which is kind of cool. So I think if you're using this to tutor up creatures, you're probably you probably should be on Galord's Ascension,
I
unless
mean,
you're
maybe
in
if
like
he's not playing white.
yeah, if you're like in a bug deck or something. But even then, I think we probably have marginally better creature tutors. I don't know, maybe. I think if you're doing the combo thing, this card's probably more real. Although we also had Aether Forge, which is a similar effect, so I'm not entirely certain. This one at least has functionally zero deck building restriction because you can just name like Brushwag and do the thing. Um, I think this card is getting a little bit more hype than it probably warrants, but I think it's a neat little tool.
It's a fun 2-card combo. Some people really like 2-card combos. Like, I think it's fine. I don't think it's gonna break anything, but like, might see some play and have some success. I really don't know.
I think it's just a solid role player, and that's
Yeah.
about it.
So
Go
this
ahead.
next card I think actually has a kind of unintended use case that I'm really excited about.
Oh, okay. Go ahead. Yeah, I actually don't know what you're talking about.
So Guided Sniper is 1 and green for 3/2. Spell can't be countered. Whenever one or more creatures with flying attack, upgrade it. Um, so the kind of obvious case is, well, it's a 2-mana 3/2 that can't be countered. That's pretty fucking good. It also has this flying hate. Notably, it's not attack you. So if you're
Yeah.
playing like a blue green or blue green white, some kind of flyers deck, most of the ones we've seen right now are blue white or mono blue. This is you play 1-drop Lord Rokai, turn 2, you play this, you swing with Lord Rokai. This is already a 4/3.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
think this card would be good if it didn't count your own flyers too, but the fact that you can set that for yourself means that like this can fairly easily be a 2-mana 4/3, which um isn't great, but like you can also get a hexproof too if you get
yeah,
it
you give it
twice.
hexproof first, I guess, even because you can't take
Probably.
advantage of the
It
third.
depends on the matchup, but
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, like I don't know. I think this card is just like I'm I'm not sure that the deck that you play this in is good, but I kind of like I don't know if I would do this with Rokai, but I kind of like this more with a card like Panya. Um, feels more like the kind of thing that um could maybe work.
I mean,
Maybe
I
maybe
think I
some
kind of
like
agree
weird
with Pip on the
Rokai variant.
Rokai thing, where it's like I
Yeah.
think Panya is good, but then like if you're playing this, I think you're kind of going like Mimi Big Stompy, where that one extra point of power really does matter.
Oh, so you disagree with me? Okay.
I mean, I think Panya is. I obviously think that Panya is a fucking amazing card, but like,
Yeah.
I think that if you're playing this in that kind of like flyer cheatsy shell, but I think in general, like I think it's a well statted can't be countered threat, and God knows the world could use more of those. So.
Yeah. I think it's like it's a nice thing to have around. It'll be fun to build with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can grow off your opponents too. So like sometimes it'll just randomly be really really good in
Mm-hmm.
that case. um,
so who
all right.
wants to pick the next card?
I can do it. So we have Osk, the Maker's Pet. This is probably going to be in like the top 5 most played cards in the set. Because people really love to play decks that are full of creatures, and this card is basically just a better mana aesthetic in
And
those
people
decks.
just like aesthetics. I mean, it's a cute
Yeah.
squirrel that has 5
Yeah.
colors on it. People like that.
Yeah. So what he does is he's a 1-mana 0/1. He taps for 1 mana of any color, but you can only use it to cast creatures or activate creatures' abilities. And then he has this crazy mana sink where you can pay 10 mana, including 1 of each color, and sacrifice him to make Osk Awakened, a 2020 Squirrel God creature token with hexproof, trample, and indestructible.
Oh god, I didn't grab the token image. Give me a second. I feel like I'm doing a disservice to our boy if I don't grab
The
the.
token is sweet, yeah. Like,
Mm,
and I think that there is real value in like your mana dork randomly cashing in to win you the game in late game because the general drawback of mana dorks is how they're not good top decks in late game. So yeah, I mean this is pretty hype. Like a mana aesthetic for creature decks that randomly, gives you a late game insurance engine. So like I think that's cool. Also redundancy is really important, and with losing Kaine's Devoted, this is a good card to have that kind of like fill that niche. Again, only for like majority creature decks, but still like a neat card to have for sure.
mm.
And the fact that it's legendary means like there are some cards that care about that. So I don't know if you want to curve this into Astute Prophet, like that doesn't seem terrible.
Yeah, overall, and people were talking about, yeah, just like legendary dot deck. It seems like a reasonable ask. So yeah, overall, I think it just seems like a
Oh,
powerful
this is
card.
great. This is great in legendary slot deck. I didn't even think about that. This is like perfect for that, right?
SMH my head. Dodger not even reading my post write ups.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But
I
yeah,
read
just
most of them. I just missed that one, I guess.
yeah, how dare you? But overall, just it's a 1 mana dork that has reasonable upsides. Not much more you could want out
Yeah.
of a Guk card.
Did you have anything you wanted to say, Pip?
Nope, we covered most of it.
Alright, cool.
A
Alright.
word. Next up is premium membership, which I just quickly added this in here because, hey, it's 2 mana hardened scales, and obviously there are lots of these effects. 1 mana makes a big difference in ability to curve into / out of it, but I think that as far as I know, this is our first straight or one of our first straight up types of these effects at this cost, so I figured it was worth mentioning.
There's Twin Leaves of the Divine Realm, but that's 3 mana on a creature, so it's a bit different.
Yeah,
This also does increase like your quests. So if you're trying to go Turbo Awaken the Source or something, like maybe this helps.
But yeah, I feel like most of the time you're probably
one fetch is worth 4 counters.
Oh yeah, that's actually pretty filthy.
There are also some green quests that we didn't put on this list because they were a bit slow to enable, but like if you do resolve premium membership, then suddenly this can happen a lot faster. So like I don't know. I think it's like that use case is a bit rough, but like this also can work well with like upgrades, and there's like a card that we'll talk about later that is an upgrade creature that also wants to go with quests, so maybe there's like some kind of synergy there. But
in general, the quest is just you know, cheeky upside if it's relevant, but otherwise you're probably using this more for the +1/+1s.
Yeah, I mean, Hardened Scales is just a well-beloved card by many Magic players, so I think just having access to an effect that does it is cool. And it's nice that it has like their use case.
Okay. Next up is Procedural Genesis, and speaking of cards that had a lot of buzz about them before release, so
this one
you know that you see that last sentence that says X can't be 0? Yeah, didn't used to have that. So there was buzz about lambed combo decks where you just mauled aggressively for Procedural Genesis, dumped your entire deck of lands onto the battlefield, and then played some creature lands that could untap, animate, and just kill your opponent. So
I think the 4 mana version of that combo is still probably pretty real. We didn't want to kill the function of the deck entirely. We just didn't want it to be like a turn 3 combo type of thing. But I think casting at X equals 1 and playing a deck where you're running, entirely 1-drops is still kind of terrifying. I think there's a good chance the best version of this is going to be an X equals 2 build of the deck. But yeah, there's a lot of different things you can explore here.
Yeah, this is definitely like a pretty cool builder on card. Should also be a very fun EDH card. I think this is the kind of card that, like, if it turns out to be good in MSEM, if this were canon, it would be worth like mucho bucks, because if it's good in both like modern and EDH, you know it's going to be worth a lot of money.
thank God we don't have finance.
Yeah, for sure.
But
all right, so this card is yeah.
Oh, I didn't actually have anything to say. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Okay. The next card is one that I like a lot. It's a Relic Corrosion. So it's 1 mana to destroy an artifact or enchantment with mana value 3 or less, and you can glitch it to remove the mana value restriction for 2 mana. So Nature's Claim is legal in the format, which is a very good card. I've always been a big fan of Natural State, though. I think that like in some metas, Natural State is a really smart sideboard inclusion. I've sideboarded it before, back when it was legal in the format. This is just strictly better Natural State, and it covers the one weakness of Natural State, which is like sometimes it misses the really important thing, well, it's like, okay, just pay 2 more mana, you know? And usually, if there's a big thing that natural state wouldn't kill, well, you probably have the mana to pay for the glitch version, right? So I think that this actually, like, in decks where you care about giving your opponent the life, this is probably just going to be a better inclusion than Nature's Claim most of the time in the sideboard. I could be wrong about that, but that's kind of the vibe I get.
It definitely feels like a middle ground between Collapse the Pillars and Nature's Claim.
Yeah, I would never run Collapse the Pillars anymore now that this is around, personally.
Mm-hmm. Or sorry, I think that yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Next up we have Village Courier.
Yeah, so 1 green, 1/1 ATB. You get to grab a artifact, enchantment, or land from the top 4 cards of your library. Put in your hand. The rest go to the bottom. In general, I think this card is one of those like kind of niche little role players. It's cool that it helps you more reliably get the specific artifacts and enchantments you need while having a good fail case because, even if this hits a land, 2 mana for a 1/1 that draws a land on ATB is kind of above. It's at the very least close to rate. I don't know if it's quite above rate.
Like, Satyr Wayfinder's been good, but oftentimes it's really good because it fills your yard, right?
Yeah, it's more the 1/1 that tutors for a basic land that I'm forgetting the name of right now.
Enoch Lookout?
No, that one tutors to the top of the library.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's beside the point. I think Village Courier is probably a real card, but I also think it's one of those things where I wouldn't suggest building around it. It's just one of those cards like have in the back of your mind somewhere, and when you're building the, blue green X artifact combo deck or whatever, pick this up.
I kind of like this as if your deck's in the market for visionaries, like this card gets hit by Seek the Lost Child and Theocracy, and can help you find more copies of those. It also hits Monument to the Fallen Man, if that's your thing. Like, for instance, I ran Rudai Overseer in my Esper Theocracy list, and like this is just a mostly a better version. Like,
I mean, it's
1/1
versus 1/3.
Yeah, but for consistency wise and opening up like deck space, like you no longer have to have as high of a concentration of artifact enchantment hits. So like, I think that's kind of neat. I think this is just a very nice. I like to call them cog cards, where like they just kind of make the rest of your deck run better. This is a very nice one of those. Yeah.
So, let's move on to the multicolored section. Wait, right?
Yeah.
Next up, we have Heirloom Seeker. 3/1 for red and white. ETB, you get to tutor up an equipment card to the top of your library, and it has first strike as long as it's equipped. So, this is very good in a deck where you really need access to specific equipment every time. I wouldn't recommend it in a just aggro deck where you're generically running equipment. But playing this on turn 2 and then playing and equipping at turn 3 is a fairly good amount of pressure. I don't think it's insane, but it's respectable. I think this is gonna mostly end up not making a splash because Cetisan Dragonblade is just kind of this, but substantially better. But yeah, I think it's a neat card to know.
Yeah, I mainly dropped it on here because Shokan Captain is a card that has kind of been brought up before and does a similar thing, but was less aggressively oriented. And it kind of unlike Cetisan, it is like being a 2-drop creature. You can grab it with Theocracy. You can grab it with that again, the gnome planeswalker whose name I'm once again forgetting.
Tiny Heroine
Toddy, yeah.
Yeah, I think most of the value comes from this being a 2-drop creature.
Yeah. So yeah. I think it's not something insanely new. It doesn't bring something that we've never seen before to the table, but I think it has its own niche, and I think it's just worth keeping an eye on.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
So next up is a card which definitely does bring its own niche to the format. It's Ilhus, Knight of Zerad.
Yeah. This card is I'm very glad Chigao isn't legal anymore because this plus Chigao would be really, really stupid.
God. Just lock your
Oh,
opponent
no.
out forever.
I still think this is probably pretty dumb with tradition. I would recommend someone look into that.
What about Night of the Unliving?
Night of the Unliving plus this is really stupid. I agree with that. Like 4 mana 3/4 like could do worse.
Yeah.
Like we are a long time from Kirishima of White Chains being the most powerful 4-drop creature in the format, but that was an era that we had at one point, and I think this card is fairly comparable. It's just good into different metas. So
Yeah, I think just like having this as a rat staple to a creature is really nice for toolbox decks because there are just so many things that let you search for a creature that you want, right? Obviously it's delayed, but like then there's also the benefit of most of the time when you wipe the board, right? Like you need to spend most of your mana doing that. So your opponent gets the first tempo of getting back onto the board. Well, with this, you can wipe the board, immediately play whatever you want, and suddenly it got you a tempo advantage, right? It also means if this is on the board, your opponent is probably not going to play any more creatures. And this again has like pretty decent stats. So like it's going to dodge most red removal. It dodges Pithwilt. It might dodge Event Horizon depending on the board state. So like I don't know. I think this card is like it looks a little worse than it is. Is how I'd probably say. And it doesn't even look that bad. So
yeah. So on the subject of creatures that just wipe your opponent's entire board, next up we have Jormir, who encircles all. Um, so 8-drop, but let's just ignore that mana cost because you're never casting this thing. 10/10
Oh,
Vigilance,
wait.
Haste, all
I-
creatures able to
wait,
block.
didn't we cut it?
Yeah, I think I cut.
We,
We cut
we
Jormir.
totally cut it.
Oh,
Never
how?
mind.
I mean,
What?
the next one is still a big beefy boy. It's Nadir,
Okay.
the One Beyond, which
Sorry,
is
Jormir.
a whopping 10
Alright,
mana,
alright.
7 Jund for a legendary dragon. But, it has a built-in cheapening. It costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control that died this turn. It also has flash, so you don't have to worry about, like, blocking with something and then being like, man, wish I could have sacked that to bring out my Nadir. And then, yeah, you just get a 13/13 flying trample. Pretty simple. I think it's just...
What I love about this card specifically is the flavor connection
Mhm.
about how there's another card we'll get to in a minute called Zarad, the Final Adversary, and it's actually already in MSEM, so people might know what it does already. It's a creature that's referenced on flavor text throughout the set. It's like the final boss of the game, right?
Mhm.
And it's also a legendary creature with 7 power. So notably, if Zarad dies, suddenly this card is fully cost reduced. And the flavor text even references this being like the secret final boss that unlocks when you defeat the first final boss. So I just really love that flavor.
Yeah, and I love that Parasine went for a final form reference 3 times with Nadir, the actual final form, and Undying Lich.
Yeah.
Like, that trope is emphatically represented in this set.
This card's also sick. Like,
It's
I think
it's
that-
simple sick, which I think is sometimes the best kind of
mechanically.
sick.
I think something people are gonna screw up a lot is trying to break this. And I think from the experience we've seen with like Unbowed Heart and all of these other like cost reduced big creatures, it generally isn't actually worth spending a lot of time and energy trying to reduce a creature's cost if it's just gonna be a big idiot, big idiot.
Yeah, unless you're doing it on like turn 2 or 3.
Yeah, if you are finding a way to produce this on turn 2 or 3, it's probably good. But also you shouldn't be.
Yeah.
If you are,
Something
please
went
let us
wrong.
know.
Yeah.
And I also think unfortunately it's actually not like whereas Heart at least is more easy to, figure out circumstance where you play it out and then you sacrifice it into what lurks beyond and, do something stupid that way. I don't really feel like Nadir has that going on for it. But I don't know. I think the card is a very cool design. The one thing
It's
I would,
not hard to imagine a card that could break this. guess.
think it's hard to imagine a card that could break this that would then like okay, let's take Phyrexian Dreadnought, which is like a
Yes.
crazy efficient version of the effect needed to break this. This is still a 5-drop with Phyrexian Dreadnought.
Wouldn't it be
1
a
mana for
4-drop?
Phyrexian Dreadnought +4.
No, it'd be a 4-drop because this card costs
Right, but
3
I'm
if you
saying
fully-
counting the Phyrexian Dreadnought.
Yeah, so it costs 3 if you reduce it completely.
Yeah, but Phyrexian Dread. Oh, sorry. Yes, I see what we were saying. Yeah. I was just doing the math wrong.
yeah.
I was thinking about the fact this is 13/13. But yeah, I don't know. I think like even in that world, you're spending 2 cards and 4 mana, and you are getting 13/13 flying trample, which looks great until your opponent kills it. So I think
Yeah.
if this
Just
card
let this
ends up-
be a fun Timmy card, basically.
yeah, I think
Yeah,
I
pretty
think this
much.
is a really sick and fun Timmy card.
Oh yeah, and
Yeah.
by the way, for our first MSEDH game night with Nadir, I'm definitely gonna allow Nadir and Zarad partners because come on now.
So one thing that I would note, by the way, is here fully pays for his own commander tax 3-ish times if you have the mana up to immediately recast.
Oh, that's kind of filthy.
All right. So let's see. Next up is Selvar the Seeker.
Hmm.
So Selvar is a Watch Wolf at base, a green-white creature for 3/3. Whenever a quest counter is put on a permanent you control, he upgrades. And he has a lot of options. So he can get +1/+1, First Strike, Vigilance, Reach, Trample, or Lifelink. Now that's a pretty big set of things you can do on like a creature that's Watch Wolf at base. And you do need to run quests with him to make him worth it. So like obviously there's some parasitic nature to that, but like I think really just Seek the Lost Child is all you need. Like this is a hit off Seek the Lost Child. You can curve into it, and like being a Watch Wolf at base means that like even in games where you don't actually upgrade it, it's not like the end of the world. So I don't know. I think this card could get there, especially if there are more quests besides Seek the Lost Child that you can fit into your deck.
I think I'm more of a skeptic than these two about how good Selvar is, mainly because I feel
I
like
don't think it's like great, but like I think it could warrant inclusion in some decks.
Mhm. And I mean, I'm totally ready to have egg on my face, but I'm just for now. I'm like, I'm gonna be the naysayer on this card.
What do you think, Pip?
I mean, I think the base case of a Watch Wolf is pretty good. Like, Anomaline has seen play before. So the question is whether getting these mechanics on it whenever you get a quest going is better or worse than the 5 mana Anomaline takes to do its thing.
You know, Anomaline's pretty good with this card actually.
So the other thing I would note is Arkadai isn't the only thing with quest counters.
Really?
Discoveries of Akiva has quest counter enchantments as well,
Wait, what? Really?
Interesting. Yeah, I
such
forgot
as
about
Align the Astrolabe, Fallback Plan,
that.
Lockdown. Don't play Lockdown with this; you'll be very sad. Seek Perfection probably does it, honestly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are so much better. What the hell? I didn't realize there was a quest counters. I always just my brain just skipped over the counter type on those. Oh my god. Okay.
Neat. Yeah, I don't.
Was
I
that
don't
just
think that
was that
changes
just
my opinion
convergent
of this card.
design or what happened there?
It's the same type of counter used on quests in Zendikar.
Yeah, like
Okay.
I think Para is the one who's kind of like changing the dynamic here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I also agree. I don't think it should fundamentally change anything, especially because you don't want to put those in the same deck. But I think
Yeah.
that's another dimension people should check out.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if there are like random cards in the future that happen to add quest counters. You know, like it's really not that hard to imagine.
All right, Skalnir Ruinbringer, red green X, 5/5 trample, enters with X +1/+1 counters on it, and it deals damage equal to the number of +1/+1 counters on it to each creature without trample.
This card's okay. It might see play when Blue Kronos rotates.
I feel like the base case of it as a 4 mana 5/5 trample isn't actually that good. Like it's
Yeah.
fine, but I don't think that's good enough for MSEM play. Maybe this does stupid things if you're like in a ramp deck and you can cast it for X equals like 2 or 3, and then it's a board wipe while being a 8/8 trample. But even then, I feel like that's a lot more effort than something like Tyrant of Tributes. So I'm not super excited about that.
So I think like Earthbreaker Behemoth is the biggest competition for this card.
Yeah.
Obviously, like this being a AOE is what gives it the different niche, basically. I don't think the comparison to Tyrant is really fair because there are plenty of like I think if you take Tyrant and it's like, okay, you can also just play it for 4 mana and not have its ETB happen, like I would like that would make the card so much better, right? Because a big problem with those kind of really strong ramp targets is like, well, they sometimes get stuck in your hand. Well, like you can play this as like a reasonably on-rate creature, right? Early in the game, if you get like, if you're curving out or you don't have your ramp or whatever, or like for whatever reason. So I think that like for ramp decks, this is an interesting option that is rarely dead, and is big and flexible. And I don't know. I just think it's a neat card.
I'm not convinced the like cast this as a 5/5 in your ramp deck or 6/6 in your ramp deck is particularly good, just because ramp decks are usually operating on an angle of attack that's kind of fundamentally different from wants to play a 5/5 for 4 or 6/6
Well,
for 5.
it's not about like what you want to do. It's more like there are matchups where you cast this for 7 or 8 mana, it wins you the game, right? Just like Tyrant. But the difference is that this not being stuck in your hand is pretty important. There's also like it's legendary, so you can get pick and counter for it. Um, that's nice for that archetype. Uh, I don't know. I think you're underestimating it a little bit.
Probably.
More card choices never hurt anybody.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Next up is your card. Caillou. Go off.
Okay, so this is the thing I was referring to way earlier when I was like, there's a card I saw which made me go, okay, Construct Tribal is real, and that was Urok. Naturally, it's a 2/2 haste, which like, or sorry, 3/2 haste, which like whatever. But then it also on ETB buffs all of your all of your creatures, not just constructs, all of your creatures, um, and it does that again whenever another construct enters the battlefield. So you can like, if you devised companions with this out, um, you get a 2/1, a 3/1, a 4/1, and then buff all of your creatures by +3/+0, which is just insane. And of course,
Actually,
he has
I think all of the tokens get buffed.
Correct.
the.
They all enter at the same
Oh,
time.
okay,
They
and,
enter
and
it
yeah,
in.
so they all enter as 4. So you get 3 4/1s. He becomes a 5/2, and I mean you're just off
And
to
your
the
opponent
races. At
usually
that point.
dies. The main awkward thing is the fact that this is a construct that isn't an artifact.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Most
you
of the
need
constructs in this set
yeah.
aren't.
The thing is like pretty much every other construct in MSEM is, so like it's not that hard to
It balances
play.
out, yeah.
Mhm.
I hadn't considered the device companions align, which is actually what caused me to leave this off the list initially. But I think how you bring that up is definitely very relevant. And if there is a deck with any sort of construct synergies, like this card should probably be in it. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I just feel
I
like
think my
I feel like
oh,
this
sorry.
kind of single-handedly makes constructs a potential deck. I'm not saying that like it's a real deck,
Yeah,
but I'm
maybe.
saying that like this is like this card alone. I'm like, maybe I'm gonna jam League for the first time in ages and just try out
I feel like
constructs.deck.
I feel like what the deck is missing is good one drops.
That's true. What is
Like
the
Oceanographer is fine, I guess.
if
I'm not sure
only
what else
if
you
only
want.
Tide Hollow Lich was a construct? Big sad.
Yeah,
We should just
like
make
that
a
would
format white
be
errata
big.
that construct has the same meaning as artifact creature and vice versa.
I would strongly recommend not doing that.
Yeah, it's rough.
So let's talk about Vosh, who is
Oh yeah,
probably
this
the
boy.
sickest red-white equipment payoff we've had in a
I
long
don't
while.
know why I thought this, But then when you said that, I completely forgot the name of this, and I'm like, why are we moving on to talking about leftist YouTubers all of a sudden?
No. All right, moving on. Um, if you equip this guy with like an academics claymore and swing, you're gonna start popping off really quickly. Um, the one thing that I think will probably hurt this card a little bit is he wants you to both be going wide and find a way to equip him, and he's not playable unless he's equipped. So that kind of sucks.
If
But
we
if
have
you
like
also,
a good creature that makes an equipment token, that might help.
yeah, like if you can arm him, that's great.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna say like the card is dead in the water, but I think actually that's kind of a big hoop.
Hmm.
I still think like if you have him and like one other creature, you're getting enough value out of his upgrade that I'm like interested.
Yep. If Seto-san still had our old +1, then that would be a lot juicier
Oh
with him.
yeah, this would be great with old Seto. I also just like by virtue of being a 2 mana creature, like that helps a lot with the ways that white generally generates card advantage.
Hmm.
Um, so like I don't know. I feel like if you're building a deck with equipment synergies, this guy should probably be in it. Um, like for instance, in that old like Hammer Time style deck that people were running before we nerfed some of the equipment synergies, like this card would be really good in that deck.
I mean, on the one hand it would be, but on the other hand, like part of the thing that
It
made that
wouldn't be making that deck good, but like it would still be good in the deck.
my point is the thing that made that deck good is like when you are equipping, when you get your combo together and creature, your opponent just kind of dies.
Yeah,
And I think making your broken equipments marginally better is not where you want to be. Um, I think if this card is going to succeed, it's going to look like a more fair equipment game.
yeah. It's kind of a moot point because like there you can't really do that anymore. Like
Yeah.
there is Loyal Squire, but like 2 mana is a big difference.
Yep.
I think that like I still think there's enough good equipment that I'm like fine just running this fairly most of the time. Maybe I don't know.
It's worth
Uh,
trying, but I'm a
yeah,
little bit worried just because 2 mana for a 2/2 that doesn't have text unless he's equipped is kind of rough.
Hmm.
Um,
yeah, it's fair
all
enough.
right, let's talk about Xenocrata, Reality Breaker. For anyone who is involved in kind of the greater MSE lore stuff, Xenocrata's last almost MSEM appearance was when she showed up in Ildathak. Um,
Um,
Ildathak did not get in, but Arkadai did, so
oh,
this is the first Xenocrata in MSEM.
just quick
We
lore
had
thing.
Um,
her
I
fleet
always
for a
thought that
while though.
Xenocrata was originally from Ildat, or I'm just gonna call it Ildach because that's
no,
how I used to pronounce it.
Il-
Where are they from?
she is a invader. Um, in general, she's a big fan of showing up and invading planes.
Okay, and we don't
Um,
know her origin plane yet.
I can't remember. I know I knew it at some point. I always want to say it's Theros, but I don't think it actually is Theros.
Okay,
Um,
but it is a known set in some capacity.
I'm certain Cyber told me at some point, and I have forgotten it.
Okay, so basically hit them
Um,
up if you want to know their lore, basically.
yeah. So the +2 uh is eh. It's not actively bad. If your opponent only has one creature that can purchase in a crowd, the +2 is good. If your opponent really needs the lands, the +2 is good. But otherwise, that's not really what you want to do. Thankfully, on impact, she can immediately -3 and do a kind of mini board wipe, which is pretty sick. The main issue with that mini board wipe is it kind of then leaves her doing nothing for many, many turns as she pluses back up. I guess you can -3 +2 -3, but I don't think that's a play pattern you want to do.
She kind of does like a Timio impression, sort of like OG Timio.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I agree with that. Which also then makes sense because OG Tamio was Sai's first walker and one of their favorites.
Yeah,
Uh, and the -10 is really exciting, but it's also kind of a control walker, so it's that -10 is less scary in a control deck than it is in a combo deck. So I'm not super sure on her place in the format. I think she's probably the worst of the three planeswalkers in the set, and you might notice I haven't been
yeah.
very high on any of them.
I just have trouble imagining a scenario where you play her over something like Glitch. You know?
Yeah, like Glitch or one more mana gets you Iviana,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
who similarly can board wipe, but also can pressure people out and, draws the cards immediately. So, I don't know.
Yeah,
Card's neat. I don't think it does much.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that kind of the more I just think about or we talk about these cards, it makes me wish that there was like some sort of rotating MSE standard where like because I feel like there's lots of these cards where like they're just close enough where they're like might be good enough for MSEM, but they'll definitely be good enough to have an impact on their standards. But yeah, that's just a side thought. Next up is Zarad, the final adversary. Already talked about this bad boy a little bit, and he was altering the format thanks to New Horizons, I believe. So, but basically, costs starting cost of 9, but costs 1 less to cast for each creature that died this turn. Does kind of shield red type thing where you can reanimate this and then reanimates a thing for free at the beginning of your upkeep. And you can also protect him by sacrificing another minion, essentially,
And
granting it indestructible.
Yeah. So we've sort of already talked about this card before because it was Arkadai's representative in New Horizons.
yeah, I think if people want a full breakdown on this card, you can go back and listen to that episode.
Yeah.
Rod has done nothing since then, but there also hasn't been much time since then, so
Yeah.
no real fault of the cards for that. But yeah, I don't think there's any new updates.
It's like one of the face cards of the set, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So the next card is a canon reprint, but a very flavorful one, which is Bag of Holding.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think this card does too much in MSEM. I recently played a game of Penny Dreadful, which is a canon magic format versus Hersey, where she built a deck around this. So I'll be curious to see if we see that in MSEM. I think the main issue with doing so is MSEM is a format with Pithwilt. So if you're planning on casting lootings and basically turning them into draw twos for 1 mana for 6 value, you're going to be very sad when your opponent just blows it up before you get to cash it out.
Yeah. You do need to spend 4 mana to catch it, so it's like not great. I figured I'd just put it on the list because like it's pretty much slam dunk reprint, and also Bag of Holding is one of my favorite cube cards of all time. So like I don't know. I figured I'd just mention that, but
Yep, it's
I
just a
agree.
cool
It doesn't
card.
have a ton of MSEM viability. I think like I think maybe if you're like wheeling or something, or if you're like I don't know, like if you're in some kind of maybe if you're in some kind of storm deck with a lot of excess mana, you can use this to generate a lot of extra cards, but I'm not sure that's the most efficient way of doing so.
Ah, you see. So you play this on turn 1, and then you're able to discard 2 cards to your mana overflow. See, this is how.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, maybe. Yeah, I don't know. Like it's not awful.
Mm-hmm.
So the next card is a card I actually put back on this list because I'm really excited about it. I have no idea how to break it, but I'm convinced it is breakable. The Book of Secrets is 4 mana for a legendary artifact. If you would look at or reveal one or more of, you may first search that library for that many cards of that library, then put those cards on top. So here's a couple of things you can do with this. If you play this with Monkey Shine, congratulations, you just cast 1 mana plus 4 mana for Demonic Tutor plus Imperial Seal, and you didn't lose any life. If you have something that allows you to look at the top some number of cards for your opponent's library and then exile some number of them, you can now use that as a repeated extract. I think that mode is less good than just the tutor up mode. The main issue that I think the tutor mode has is 4 mana to play this, and then you have to spend additional forced in a fair deck.
Yeah.
Most fair decks don't want to be casting tutors. It's hard to kind of abuse that. But I feel like there's a lot of kind of stupid capabilities here, especially because it works with Scry.
Yeah,
Like,
I think what you want to do is like have some kind of way to repeatedly scry,
if
and
you have a
basically use this to repeatedly tutor through your deck for 0 mana.
if you
As
have
like kind of a combo engine.
so let's say you play this. If you already had a sigiled starfish out, you can immediately tutor to the top.
Yeah.
And then if the card you tutor to the top allows you to start chaining on the untap, you can get really stupid.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it
I think the
gives me a
cards
lot of vibes of, I don't know if you played Custard during this era, Pip, but it reminds me a lot of Netropolis's supercomputer, and that card was it was basically like whenever you tutor a card, tutor an additional card,
Yeah,
and
I recall it.
yeah, and it did some really stupid stuff because that format had like fetch lands, and I think like it was a 4 mana artifact, and I think that this just has a lot easier of a trigger condition and a lot more ways that you can kind of just go like, yeah, I'm just gonna tutor up anything and everything now, thank you. So yeah, I think it's
Yeah, I
I'm
think
kind of
like,
I'm kind of very excited to look for similar ways of breaking it.
so the thing that like I would say I would try to use it is if you are using it as a combo piece, just epic and counter for it. Don't like put it in your main deck.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Because like it is a clunky card, and you often don't want it like cluttering up your opening hand.
Yep, being legendary
All right.
does have its upsides.
So
And
next up is the set's dual land cycle. Those lands are Coastal Metropolis, Fertile Steppe, Spawning Barrens, Thalassic Borough, and Wild Peak. And they are untyped dual lands that enter the battlefield tapped unless you have 15 or less life.
I think these are kind
and
of
just
in
as a
the
note,
unenviable position of probably not being great in MSEM or
yeah,
EDH, where like in EDH getting to 15 or less life is pretty like you have so many other lands that are probably better
yeah,
before
it's
this,
basically impossible. Yeah.
and in
Um,
MSEM proper, being untyped I think kind of just kills them.
I think these could actually be safely. I think these could safely be typed, but it would be a little scary. Like
I
I don't think they really hurt much if they're typed, but
I think they become playable if they're typed,
yeah,
like
there's
pretty
nothing wrong with them
immediately.
being playable.
Um, and I think even without them being typed, I'm not convinced they're like unplayable. But I think in general, like on a more philosophical level, the Torment Lands incident scared a couple of us, myself included, away from wanting typed lands as often,
Well,
just because
Terminals being typed wasn't what made them.
the
I don't
it
buy that at all.
again, I've talked about the issue with Torment Lands. There's a reason those
Yeah,
cards still got banned when they stopped being typed.
yeah,
But the Torment Lands, I think, were kind of the last era of lands just being able to randomly be typed without, too much thought going into it. Um, I
yeah,
think I'm unconvinced that these lands are unplayable without types, and I'm fairly convinced they are some degree of playable with types. And I'm just inherently worried because I think MSEM's mana base is kind of insane enough already.
yeah. It's fair enough. I like at some point. Well, okay, we don't need to go into this whole discussion right now. As for these cards as they are,
Pip and Dodger are really trying to start a philosophical discussion about the state of lands in the meta when we're one card away from the end of the set.
yeah, as they are, I think that if you are fetching for like a plague land on turn 1, then there's a pretty decent chance you can have this as an untapped duel on turn 3. Or like you'll definitely have an untapped duel on turn 3. And maybe on turn 2 if you have another way to lose life next turn too. So like I guess that's
Yeah,
cool.
fetch Plague Land, cast Depart Evangel.
Yeah, like I don't know. I feel like if you're playing a Departed Evangel deck though, then you're kind of sus on running cards that are tapped lands on turn 1. You know what I mean? So like
No, I agree. I
yeah.
think that's generally my vibe is just that I am sus of these cards in general. So I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like I think in general they probably won't see play, but that's been true for basically every dual land cycle that's been released since I've started the format. So
Hmm.
whatever.
Yep.
Uh,
And I think the last card that we have, it's kind of ironic we're ending here because this is where lots of adventures actually go to begin. It's Crowded Tavern. So it's add 1 mana of any color, spend this mana only to cast a creature spell with a creature type no creature you control has. So this way you can, if you have an elf archer and an elf bard, you can still cast the elf bard, I believe, if you have the elf archer out.
yes, that's how it
Mhm.
works.
So a very clean way of making it so that it's not something that doesn't share a type, essentially, because that's usually with the way that these things
yeah.
are worded.
there's been some discussion around this card because I think you posted it as like one of your cards of the day. I think that like it's, as people pointed out, it's mostly just worse than Channeling Stone for these kind of like uh play a bunch of creatures and play a bunch of special lands that only let you cast the creatures, and that way you have an easy 5-color mana base. But you need a certain density of those kind of effects at playable levels to like make that deck work, and we're kind of pretty close to hitting that, if not already, because like you have Channeling Stone, you have Mana Confluence, you have Nebula, you have High Prairies. This is another card that kind of goes in there. So like I think it's nice to have for those decks because people do like playing those kind of decks.
Hmm.
That's all I got.
And yeah, okay.
Sweet.
Any final thoughts y'all have about Arkadai and its future tenure in MSEM?
Yeah, I think Arkadai is a very delightful set. Just like it's very fun to read through. Again, would recommend that if you haven't done that. I think that Arkadai has very few cards that are like definitely going to tear up MSEM. Like some sets you can be like, oh, that card's definitely gonna see play, but Arkadai doesn't really have that. It has a lot of cards that are like, this will probably be a good role player when the situation demands it, or maybe you can build around this. So that's cool. I think it's. I also have played limited, and limited's great, so I'm excited to draft it. But yeah,
My,
I just overall big fan of the set. Happy to have it in MCM.
my Archetype story before closing off is Parasine was starting up a Ask Me Anything in the flavor town of the MSE Discord. And since the set is an MMO set, I shot in fairly, more or less joking. I said, "What's Thunder Fury Blessed Blade of the Windseeker die like?" And they immediately called up the Ildrin the Apex Blade, and I just really love that because it shows they really thought through as many different MMO memes and like references and tropes that they could, and made sure that all of those ended up in Arkadai at least in some form. Um,
That is really cool. I didn't even know that, but like it's very clear that the set is a top-down design, and I think it's one of the better top-down sets that exist in the custom verse. I'd say.
I strongly agree with that assessment.
Yeah.
It's, and again, like, it's so hard to do that when your base is just kind of generic fantasy. And I mean, obviously there's like the MMO element, but like they've done such a good job of like partitioning or like taking that part of like, yeah, sometimes part of an MMO is like having and like indulging in this generic fantasy, and some of it is like the more video gamey tropes, and they just do like a really good job of balancing that so that one doesn't overwhelm the other.
Yeah. Sweet.
But yeah, congratulations again to Parasine. Very excited to play with the cards. And
Yeah, it's so cool that we have 2 new designers too.
yeah, and
Um,
on that note, join us anywhere between a week and 2 weeks. I'll definitely edit this over with the exact time for when the Riddles of Revio review is going to be coming out, the other set that's getting added to the format at the end of this month.
Sick.
But yeah, until then, this is Caillou, Dodger, and Pipsqueak signing off.